Hello, hello. This is Taylor Ursula of That's So Pisces, and it's time to talk about Libra season. So let's dive in, shall we? So this is it. Summer is officially ending as we approach the fall equinox that is aligned with the beginning of Libra season. I think many of us may be ready for summer to be over, right? We had, let's recap, just a wild thing summer. We had a all bets are off kind of summer. And this fall equinox and the shift into Libra season may be one that is feeling welcome, feeling inviting. We know this time in the Northern Hemisphere to be when we start to slow things down. We approach the thinning of the veil that occurs in October, and we get to integrate everything that we've been experiencing in the wild summer times, that we get to kind of process, make sense of, connect around through other people, etc. And the Southern Hemisphere, you're gearing up towards summer. So things are starting to open up, things are starting to bloom, and feeling that pull out of the cold, out of the winter time into what becomes possible. So a welcome shift all around. And this year, Libra season starts fresh out of the gate, coming out of a first quarter moon in Sagittarius. You may have seen my video on that just a few days ago. So the energy leading us into Libra season is kind of potent. It's kind of intense, maybe, wanting to kind of wrap up everything going on in Virgo season, that mutable energy of let's finish and prepare for this transition. So there may be just a lot kind of percolating or coming to a head or manifesting in some way as we enter this Libra season. As we enter Libra season, we are also embracing eclipse season. Okay, so we will have the full moon in Aries at 6 degrees, which we'll talk about more in depth as we approach that in that video. But while there is no eclipse at the Aries full moon, there is an eclipse at the Libra new moon at 21 degrees. So we are opening up this eclipse portal in this Libra season and getting a sense of kind of what releases we are incurring through the South Node while inviting new beginnings through the new moon. For the first half of Libra season, roughly, the sun in its fall will be co-present with Mars, also in its detriment. So we've got two planets hanging out in a sign that they don't necessarily love. But what that brings to us is maybe an opportunity to advocate for what it is that we need through the advocacy of helping others. It gives us an opportunity to shed light on things that are imbalanced or unfair. And it gives us a way to start to carve away some of those things, especially since we also have the South Node present with these planets here in Libra. And we'll bring in the fact, too, that we have Chiron lingering in Aries at the moment, meaning that everything that we experience in Libra season will be reflecting some of those Chiron themes that are happening in the opposite sign in Aries. That's also where the North Node is right now. So we'll be seeing some themes around our inability to initiate and how that's become kind of identified within us. And we'll be thinking about how breaking through those Chiron barriers is trying to pull us toward the North Node in Aries, trying to provide nourishment and maybe some reframing to this North Node journey that we're collectively experiencing in Aries right now. We have some notable shifts occurring in this Libra season. The first being that Venus will be leaving Leo finally. It's been a long few months, y'all. Venus will be leaving Leo finally and making its way into Virgo. Mercury will be leaving Virgo and making its way into Libra to join the Sun and Mars. Pluto will be stationing direct at 27 degrees of Capricorn and begin to make its slow crawl back to the edge of Capricorn, back into Aquarius in the new year. We have Mars making its way home to the land of Scorpio. We'll have another Mercury cazimi. You may remember that we had one in Virgo while Mercury was retrograde, our inferior cazimi. And we'll now have a Mercury cazimi taking place with both of these planets in Libra. This is where Mercury begins to overtake the Sun and starts to progress beyond the Sun. And lastly, we have Mercury then making its way from Libra into Scorpio to join Mars. So Libra is cardinal energy. We are initiating something. We are starting a new cycle. And we definitely get that feeling with the numerous planetary shifts taking place throughout the month. All right, so I'm going to start chatting about some of the transits. Tune in if you want to hear some of these specific highlights about what's going to be going on. If not, feel free to jump to the tarot intro where we will talk about what card we're looking at for the season that will be joining the Chariot. If you've tuned into these before, we've been using the Chariot as our card of the year, and for each zodiacal season, we pull out a tarot card that goes along with that season. So we'll touch base about what themes we're looking at this season for Libra, and then we'll break down our readings by sign. So stay tuned. So the first few days of Libra season are very Chiron-centric. I mentioned that the Sun will enter Libra right on the heels of a 29-degree first quarter moon in Sag. So a lot of energy kind of ramped up there. And this is happening late on the West Coast Friday and early Saturday for everyone else. Also on Saturday is when Venus enters into a trine with Chiron. So we're connecting some of those initiation wounds around our relationships, right? And this is the third aspect that Venus has made to this Chiron. We had Venus trine Chiron before stationing retrograde. We had Venus go into a second trine with Chiron while retrograde. And this is now Venus finishing up this narrative. So this particular leg of the Venus Chiron story is an ending, a revelation, maybe perhaps getting some clarity on the other end of that retrograde about what that Chiron is saying to how we relate to other people, to what it's saying about how we relate to our finances, what it's saying about where we can find connection points throughout that wounding. So where this becomes interesting is that Sunday, the following day, we have Mars move into opposition to Chiron. The Sun will do this later in the season. So this may be a preview of some of what that activation looks like. Now, remember, this is a Mars that is in its detriment. And so this is a Mars that may feel like it has to act in a certain way in order to get what it needs. And this is a Mars that's also being ruled by that Venus that we just talked about, finishing up that trine to Chiron the day before from the place of making up that progress that Venus had to go back over in retrograde. And so there's something about this 1-2 punch where the trine might be, trines are smoother or easier, but that's not a qualification of the transit itself. It's more about how the information is relayed. So that trine may bring up something that Mars then needs to act on, needs to strike through, needs to cut out, perhaps. And that's all, again, going through that command of Venus. So whatever Venus decides in this trine to Chiron, whatever information becomes reconciled or processed in that aspect, then becomes something that Mars brings into the conversation when opposing this planet. This may be a period, a weekend, a few days of tension. We may find ourselves cutting things loose or banding together with others in order to get something done. It really depends on where this is kind of taking place within your own personal chart and perhaps what other planets you have in relationship to the Aries Libra axis. Just know that we might feel activated around Chiron themes in these few days, these first few days of Libra season. And Venus is not the only one finishing up some post-retrograde conversations. On Monday the 25th, we have Mercury making its way through that Virgo retrograde shadow, making its next trine to Jupiter. So we had that trine in Mercury's retrograde, and that was connected to that third quarter moon in Gemini that we talked about a few videos ago, where Mercury was trining Jupiter before the third quarter moon and the sun was trining Jupiter after the third quarter moon. So there may be some information that we are reconciling, some drop stitches that we may be coming back for and picking up, and we might see some extension of the conversation that was taking place around that time. Whatever we were reprogramming, which is the word we used in that Gemini third quarter moon, whatever we were recategorizing or updating in our files in order to let something go, letting go of an old definition of something, of an old understanding of something, or again, categorization. Something may be coming through with this trine as Mercury finishes up that retrograde shadow that allows us to integrate something new moving forward. After that Mercury-Jupiter trine on Monday, it's a relatively quiet week, and nothing big is happening until Friday's full moon in Aries on the 29th. I mentioned before that this is a full moon that is happening technically in the presence of the North Node, also in Aries, but we are having this lunation so far away from the North Node that there is not enough overlap for an eclipse to be happening. This is also going to be true for the full moon in Aries next year. So we're not having any full moon eclipses on the Aries North Node. Just want to let that sink in for a moment. Full moons during eclipse time are usually highlighting something from the past that is culminating now in order to be kind of released to clear the way or the path forward for the North Node that it's meeting. Because of there being no full moon eclipses on the Aries sector of this nodal journey currently, this tells us that we're not necessarily being called in to pause and reflect and release in that way. This is also the same day as the final Venus square to Uranus. Speaking of all the retrograde ground we are making up for, Venus made this square 2 times prior, once leading up to retrograde while both planets were direct, once during Venus's retrograde while Uranus was direct, and now a third time while Venus is direct and Uranus is retrograde. Okay, so we may finally get some resolution on what that square opened up for us. Something is coming to a final head, and I say that because squares tend to be intense, and the Venus-Uranus square really brought up a lot of suddenly unsustainable relational patterns, financial surprises, relational surprises. We had a lot of people suddenly reach the end of their rope. A lot of relationships ended over the summer, and perhaps some of that was around this Venus-Uranus square. So there was a lot of tumult and upset going on during these Venus-Uranus squares in the context that they were at the time. Now that Venus is finishing up this journey, there's something that we're making peace with. There's one final surprise before the conversation is finally done. It may be surprising, it may be expected. There's certainly an element of unpredictability to it, but again, because it is anchored to these previous conversations, we probably know some of what it is about. It will be interesting to see how Venus handles that square while ruling the sun in this full moon configuration. So there may be something that shows up or that gets channeled through the sun in this full moon configuration that is a direct result of Venus entering into this square with Uranus. The next day, Saturday the 30th, we have Mercury in Virgo making a trine to that Uranus that is retrograde in Taurus. So while Venus is coming through and shaking things up, finishing up this conversation, Mercury's also having a second, third conversation with this Uranus, because that was a configuration that was happening while Mercury was retrograde as well. So what is maybe shocking or disruptive in the square to Venus may be a conversation piece, or may help us wrap up some of the Mercury retrograde puzzle in the trine to Uranus. It may also mean that it's something that we have an easier time integrating intellectually, conversationally. Even if it's upsetting financially or relationally, there's something that we're able to utilize with our minds that helps us make more sense of this matter. On Monday the 2nd, we have Mercury then come in and oppose Neptune. We had this experience initiated when the Sun, finishing up in Virgo, came through and opposed this Neptune point in Pisces. So this would be a really great time for kind of channeling the surreal or the abstract. This is a really good time frame for focusing on art or something mystical. Logic will not be the winning factor of this aspect. This is a time where our minds are really nebulous. We are much more psychically attuned to our environment. And so we may have some difficulty knowing where we end and someone else begins, especially emotionally. Neptune and Pisces kind of bringing out our feelings. But beyond the logical element of it, we may be very productive on a creative scale. And that could be really helpful for us because this is the same day that Venus in Leo trines the North Node, all right? And so Venus, when stationing retrograde, was very close in orb to this trine to the North Node, as it had just entered Aries at 29 degrees. So this is something we may have been feeling a hint of, or a sense of, or a buildup toward since mid-July, since that heat, that peak heat of summertime, that we're now finally starting to see make sense or reveal something to us about this path forward in Aries. We know that Venus rules artistic sensibilities and is all about the arts. And so it would probably be really fortuitous for us to engage in those creative faculties at this opposition to Neptune in order to help Venus see or illuminate what that pathway forward is through the North Node in Aries. The next day, Tuesday the 3rd, Mercury enters into a trine with Pluto, who is retrograde in Capricorn. This is just a few days before Pluto is going to station direct. This is not the final conversation to Pluto before Pluto stations direct. That will be with Mars, and we'll get to that. But it is an opportunity for us to kind of get a sense of what Pluto is concerned with as it prepares to station. This is a Pluto moving quite slow, and Mercury tends to move quite quickly. Mercury has cleared its shadow by this point, and so it's back kind of on it's back in its game, right? It's got its tools. And so this might be a time where we are able to do some deep processing around what we've been navigating in all the retrogrades that we've experienced as summer ends now, and just getting a sense of kind of who we're becoming, what power we've developed in the face of the retrograde narratives we've had, where that lives within us, what kind of agency we have now, and what that looks like for us in our day-to-day world. Mercury is sort of in charge of, what happens in our immediate environment, what happens kind of in our day-to-day lives. And so we can think about this nugget of our existence kind of connecting with a much broader scope of what things mean. where can we see the influence that we've grown within us starting to impact our day-to-day lives as well as our immediate environment. On Wednesday the 4th, we have Mars in Libra hitting the South Node while ruling the North Node in Aries. So this may be a culmination point for this leg of the journey so far. From Libra is the only place that Mars has been able to see the North Node since becoming its ruler back in July. That's been frustrating for us as we've had to put work into things, Mars and Virgo, without seeing what it was adding up to, North Node and Aries. From Libra, it's been able to see the North Node that it's ruling over, but it's not in a sign where it has access to its power. And so it has been visible to it, but kind of waving through the glass, frustrated, wanting to be where the North Node is so that it can just get us there quickly. But that's really some of the signature of this transit, is that while Aries is a fast sign, is impulsive or instinctual, we are having to kind of learn how to instigate that within ourselves, with Mars being in these signs where it can't really run to get us to the goal. Speaking from the experience of having a natal Mars in a sign it does not love, sometimes the only power that Mars has in a situation is to walk away. Mars is known as the blade. Mars cuts, and in different signs, like Scorpio, where it will be soon, it's able to act in ways that are bigger than the self, that are impactful or loud if it wants to be, right? Or sneaky if it wants to be. But it has a lot more agency in those signs to orchestrate. And in Venusian ruled signs that have to do with connection and relating, sometimes the only power that Mars has in those signs, the other one being Taurus, is to separate, is to walk away without kind of having the impact that Mars wants to have on other people. Sometimes that means letting go of things that are no longer serving us, even if those entities don't recognize that they've caused harm or don't care that we are walking away. And that can be a painful realization to have, to recognize that what action I am able to take only serves me and only speaks to me and doesn't have the kind of power or the impact on someone else. That can be really frustrating for Mars. So these are some kinds of the feelings that may come up while Mars is hanging out in Libra, but especially on this day that it's meeting the South Node. It may be that the only action that Mars can take from Libra to get us to the North Node that it's ruling in Aries is to say no to something, is to walk away from something that is no longer fair, that is no longer allowing you to remain in balance as an individual, is not advocating for you, or is not bringing you any sense of peace. And that may be it. It may not, it may feel like it's a moment that asks for more, but it may be a quiet separation. It may just be a quiet goodbye. And that's something to be aware of. That's something to get clear on. Maybe we could think about even the simple act of walking away from something being a way that we take agency for ourselves, being an initiation of sorts in the North Node in Aries. On the same day, we have Mercury moving into Libra. So a couple days after this, Venus will move into Virgo, and they'll be in mutual reception. Mercury ruling Venus, while Venus is ruling Mercury. Until then, we have a Mercury that is being ruled by Venus at the very end of Leo, which is where Venus stationed retrograde. If you recall, that was 28 degrees of Leo. So there may be something that not only Mars is carrying out for Venus on Venus's behalf when it meets the North Node, but also Mercury now being under the rule of Venus starting at the beginning of this Libra sign, but being informed by a planet at the very end of a sign that it just retrograded through, there may be some initiation of a wrapping up. There may be a little bit of a contradiction going on with we're initiating something that is tying up some loose ends. And again, this will change in just a few days, which we'll get to. But for this little window of time, be mindful that Mercury is communicating things for Venus from that end of that retrograde shadow. On Friday the 6th, we have our third quarter moon in Cancer. So we'll get into that in detail in the video for that lunation, the moon phase tarot pull. But the moon rules Cancer. This is the third quarter moon. We are releasing something, which makes a lot of sense with Mars having hit the south node, Mercury now acting on Venus's behalf as well. We are letting something go. Maybe we're releasing the emotional imprint of something from the past as we separate from it in a more social, conversational lens through the Libra part of our chart. On Sunday the 8th is when we have Mars in Libra square Pluto in Capricorn. And as I mentioned before, this is Pluto's final conversation before stationing direct in just a few days. And so a square between Mars and Pluto is typically one about power. Mars and Pluto both represent drive, instincts, Mars being more surface level, sort of what we see show up in our actions, and Pluto being much more subconscious, what's really beneath the surface, what's really driving us from deeper within. When these planets enter into a tense aspect, we get riled up. Everything that Pluto's been tracing back over in these final stages of Capricorn, a lot of Pluto's biggest lessons come at the end. And so Pluto really going back over these degrees again, which it will do one more time in the new year. It will go back to 29 degrees, right? So, okay, we're almost done with this 16-year lesson. So what Mars is coming into this conversation with may be informed by what it has walked away from in Libra. And even if it's a quiet goodbye in that moment, there is something else shaken up around us or within us. What are the implications of Mars saying no or walking away from something that it has been socially involved with for some time? What power struggles become initiated within ourselves or are activated between us and others around us drawing a boundary? We know that there are a lot of reactions to when boundaries are drawn, right? Power has shifted and expectations are no longer met the way that they were before. And that can definitely stir up some drama. This is also the same day that Venus moves into Virgo. So Mars is still being ruled by Venus. Venus is now being ruled by Mercury. Mercury and Venus are in a mutual reception. The signals are getting a little crossed. We're not sure who's running things anymore. Venus and Mercury can't see each other from these signs. They are next door neighbors now. I think of it as like the blind spot when you're driving. You're just hovering right in that spot. And so I can see kind of the other lanes of traffic, but you are just out of sight. And I can't really tell what you're doing over there. So the signals may be a little muddled right now. We may not know what's motivating us, and that may be some of that tension that's brought up between Mars and Pluto. We may be sure about why we did something a few days ago with Mars in the South Node, but now that we're being tested about it or we're being questioned, perhaps we're not sure where the information came from. On the next day, the 9th, we have Venus entering into the same woeful configuration that all planets moving through Virgo have done thus far, which is face the opposition to Saturn. Saturn has been retrograde in Pisces for all of our summer, and so is now back at 1 degree. And so Venus has this first encounter as soon as they enter into Virgo. And this may feel like a continuation of some of the conversations that the other planets have already initiated from this same opposition. Mars moving through Virgo, followed by Mercury and the Sun. And so there may be some follow through in terms of what that narrative has already looked like thus far, and now playing out regarding our relationships to other people, our access to resources at this time, even just the energy that we have. What are we doing this all for, right? Venus would rather be up there in Pisces with Saturn and getting a sense of the big picture of it all, of the possibility of it all, and sort of just hanging out in the potential. And so down here in Virgo, Venus is aware that there's kind of an endless amount of work to be done, or that we could tinker away at something indefinitely and never experience that sense of finality or completion that Pisces represents to us. This is also the only aspect that Venus encounters before ruling over the new moon eclipse that we'll talk about in just a moment. And so even though this conversation takes place quickly, Venus moving quickly, there is something about Saturn and the longevity of Saturn, the time of Saturn, that kind of gets carried into this lunation just a few days later. On Tuesday the 10th, we have Pluto stationed direct at 27 degrees of Capricorn. And this is the same day that the sun enters into that opposition to Chiron that Mars did at the beginning of the season. So whatever was initiated by Mars in that opposition may now become conscious to us, integrated into who we're becoming. Mars dealing with our instincts that may have triggered more of a reaction from us. And the sun coming through here now may be able to recognize where that reactivity came from, what we were feeling, what was being triggered in that moment. And at the same time that Pluto is stationing direct, we may be having a deeper conversation with ourselves, our motivations, and kind of where that wound in Chiron has impacted and informed what we feel is instinctual within us at this time. The next day, Wednesday the 11th, is when Mars returns home to Scorpio. Okay, this is good news, all right? Mars hasn't been home in a hot minute. If you recall, at the end of 2022, we had 6 months of Mars in Gemini. We had a long retrograde. We had a long shadow period. It was a lot. Okay, so Mars hasn't been home since it was in Aries earlier in 2022. So much has happened since then. This is now our time to start to tap into some of that sense of agency and direction. It does mean that Mars is back in a position where it's not able to see the North Node, right? It was able to see the North Node from Libra, but not from a place where it was able to do a whole lot. So even though the North Node is now out of sight for Mars, it is not out of mind, because Scorpio is the place where Mars gets to really root into its intuition. It gets to really feel connected to its environment. It's able to strategize. Maybe the other side of that coin is manipulate, but I'm not going to comment. It's Mars. So there's absolutely something that Mars has agency over as it moves through Scorpio. So this whole, it feels like the whole year at this point, the whole summer at the very least, we were so unclear, we were so uncertain, there was so much moving backwards for us, so much being disrupted and sort of falling apart. And this is maybe the first time in a moment that we actually start to feel like we're moving in a direction that we want to be moving in, that we can feel a sense of control over our lives and our trajectory at this time. And on Friday the 13th, we have Mars in Scorpio entering into a trine to Saturn in Pisces. Saturn at this point has made it back to 0 degrees, which is where it will station direct in coming weeks. And so Mars at home in its own sign, connecting with Saturn, both the malefics here, Where we've had the oppositions to Saturn, Mars is able to actually tap into some of those instincts, into that watery knowing, and may actually enjoy leaning into this more favorable aspect to Saturn. It might mean taking on some responsibility, but what Saturn's able to see from Pisces, from this big picture sign, is able to inform what Mars will want to strategize in Scorpio. So there is something being made up for in terms of Mars not being able to see the North Node right now. Mars can see Saturn, and Saturn is in this big picture sign showing us sort of the broader vision of what it is that we are hoping to build and invest our time in right now. So this can be a helpful start for Mars to get a sense of, okay, this is where I'm trying to go. These are the steps. This is what this will look like in the long term. And so here's where I'm going to start. And on the following day, Saturday the 14th, is when we have our first Libra new moon eclipse. This one's taking place at 21 degrees, and we'll talk about it at length in our moon poll video for that new moon. But what we can know about this is the same day that Mercury will oppose Chiron, in the same way that Mars did at the beginning of the season and the Sun did just a couple days ago. So there is a further conversation about this trigger point for us. And Venus is ruling over both of these events in Libra taking place from Virgo. And as I mentioned a moment ago, Venus is fresh out of this confrontation to Saturn. And where we saw Venus all summer was a place of not having extra energy, not having extra time, not having extra resources. If this is what I can focus on, if this is all I have energy for, then I have to say no to all these other things. We saw a lot of breakups happen. We saw a lot of separations and things breaking apart, right? A lot of people kind of going their own route. And so this may be perhaps a continuation of that kind of vibe. Venus in Virgo is not having the best time, okay? When is Venus going to break? This is a sign of Venus's detriment. Venus would rather be hanging out in Pisces, where things are more idealistic and more romantic and more full of potential. But in Virgo, Venus only has the work, and it feels maybe like endless work. So if Venus has to be dedicating themselves to this work at this time, to this data collecting and this experimenting and practicing and putting things into motion, then what other social niceties in Libra are we no longer able to dedicate time or resources to? This may be some of what we see show up at this lunation, which again is when the new moon is happening near the South Node, so a little bit of contradictory energy there, where we tend to want to start things at this time, but we're actually seeing sudden endings. This is not a time to manifest. This is not a time to kind of try to put something into motion in the Libra sense, because if anything, this is the garbage disposal coming to take something from Libra that is standing in our path. A few days pass between this new moon eclipse and the following aspects, which really gives us some extra time to let everything sink in and become part of this new timeline we're on. On Wednesday, the 18th, we have both the Sun and Mercury moving in to meet the South Node in Libra. This further amplifies this narrative that's initiated at the new moon eclipse, especially since it's the Sun coming through now to sort of make conscious, to bring to the surface what is being released, what needs to go, or what has just already left, right? And so this is setting us up for the Libra Mercury cazimi that we'll have the following day. And so the Sun and Mercury are both becoming aware of and starting to talk about, integrate into our language, what it is that is changing at this time. And then they meet the next day. And so this cazimi is when Mercury is going to begin to move beyond the Sun. So this is a point of clarity, perhaps. This is a point of understanding, similar to what we said about Mars moving into Scorpio, understanding what it's all been about, understanding what Mercury has been doing and has processed since the cazimi that we had with Mercury retrograde in Virgo. And you may recall this was around the Gemini third quarter moon, right? That cazimi informing what it was that we were reprogramming or updating in our sort of data folders, right? Whatever we had categorized previously that was being updated and some things were being filed away. This cazimi is trine to that third quarter moon, and so we may be getting a broader sense of what we get to move into moving forward after having done all of that release. And with that cazimi taking place at 26 degrees, it's now time for both of these planets to walk into a square to Pluto. Mercury is first, moving into this square to Pluto, and Pluto is recently direct, as we discussed. And so it makes a lot of sense that whatever the Sun and Mercury are clear on in terms of that release must now be confronted by our deepest motivations, our deepest power wounds, our deepest sickness, or whatever that means, our deepest instincts. Maybe we're confronting where we've been held back before and what we now refuse to submit to. As the Sun walks into this square the next day, we definitely start to see where drawing some of these limits, drawing some of these boundaries is changing our interaction with the world at large around us, and especially with those who have some sort of authority or power in our world. The Sun is also an entity of authority, right? And so when these two planets meet, it's absolutely an environment in which we won't walk out of this the same way. There is something deep and pervasive happening within us that is really catalyzing some process within us. On the same day, we have Venus in Virgo in a trine to Jupiter retrograde in Taurus. This might be a really nice payoff, a really nice bounty in terms of what Venus has been hard at work doing and practicing and putting into a tangible process for us in Virgo, and Venus ruling Jupiter, and now finally getting to trine Jupiter is something sweet that we get to enjoy, perhaps, where we kind of spent like a good month there in the throes of a Venus-Jupiter square. Venus was slowing to station direct, Jupiter was slowing to station retrograde, and they did so from degrees close enough to just maintain this aura of tension for us over the course of that whole month or so. And that was where we were experiencing biting off more than we could chew, signing up for more than we could commit to or carry out, and wanting to be able to indulge, but maybe feeling very limited in our resources at that time. So with this trine, we finally get a nice flow through of some of those themes. With Jupiter being retrograde, we may have sorted through what is no longer for us in terms of responsibility we want to carry and roles we want to play. And Venus being in detriment now, again, can't take on much more than what they're already working with. And so this might be a really nice settling of some of those expectations and easing into a new flow and rhythm. And on the same day, we have Mercury move into Scorpio. Okay, so Mercury is now hanging out with Mars. They will be meeting up over the course of Scorpio season. So we'll talk about that next time. But this is where Mercury is now able to start utilizing some of the strategy that Mars has been finally able to root into, and starting to think from this place, starting to take action, starting to implement plans. So we'll see how that turns out next season. In our final aspect for Libra season on the 22nd, we have Mercury newly in Scorpio moving into trine Saturn in Pisces, the same way that Mars did when it entered Scorpio just a few days ago. So this furthers the narrative of Mars being able to strategize, being able to think big picture and long term, Mercury coming through and doing the same thing, being able to start drafting a plan, and that plan will help Mars sort of take those actions to help get us closer to that North Node in Aries. So This is a very fruitful time where we may be able to think about and strategize, start to plan for what it is that we are building up to with that Saturn in Pisces. Okay, that is it for our transit highlights. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're about to move into our tarot portion, so make sure to stay tuned for the tarot intro so you can hear all about the card of the month that will be working in tandem with the Chariot, our card of the year. And then you can jump into the reading for your specific sign. So I'll see you there. Okay, here we go. So if you've tuned in before, you've heard me talk about how this year is the year of the Chariot, and we are experiencing our sort of collective upgrade through the lens of this archetype, which is all about understanding our motivation, understanding our drive, so that we can get those influences aligned and move forward at will. Makes a lot of sense given we have not been able to move forward very much this year at all. Something deeper beneath the surface happening for us. This Libra season, we'll be looking at the Justice card in our tarot deck. And we know that justice is all about making things right, setting things straight, putting things back into balance, right? And justice is no stranger to the sword, right? Just because we're looking at a Venusian energy does not mean that we do not have weapons at our disposal. So this sort of makes me think about what I said about Mars being the blade before and Mars being in Libra for the majority of this Libra season. So we will be looking at the cards that we pull in just a moment through the lens of how making things right, how putting things back into balance is allowing us deeper access into correcting our instincts, into aligning our instincts and intuition, so that as we begin to make our way forward, which we saw we will this month, we'll be doing so from a place of rightness, of justice, right? Which I think will absolutely tie into the narrative of not being able to rush toward the North Node in Aries. There is something we are confronting in this Libra season that will be released, that will be again made right or set free in some way, that will help us begin to make our way toward that North Node. All right, so go ahead and check out your timestamp in the description below. Go ahead and jump to your sign. You can read for your sun, moon, or rising, and take what works for you and leave everything else behind. All right, I'll see you there. Welcome, Libra. Step right up. As we discuss Libra season, we are looking at the sun, the new moon eclipse, Mars, Mercury, and the South Node, all occupying your first house of self and how you move through the world. So I expect you to be voted most likely to transform over the course of this season. There's so much loaded in that house that's going to be up for review for you, especially since you are also ruled by Venus, who's going to be moving into your 12th house about halfway through this season. So finally finishing up that Leo retrograde that you were ruled by. Everyone was like, oh, Leos are fine now that Venus is direct. And I was like, what about the Libras? Okay, none of y'all have been fine, all right? And there is something finally being reconciled for you at this time. Mars will be moving into your second house of my resources, my values, my stuff, and what I do to earn my resources. We'll have Pluto stationing direct in your fourth house of home, origin story, land, emotional body. We have Saturn and Neptune hanging out in your sixth house of time, routine, and the body. The Aries North Node and that Aries full moon will be lighting up your seventh house of one-on-one relationships, be they friend, business, lover, or enemy. We've got Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus hanging out in your eighth house of shared resources, and psychological landscape. And as I mentioned before, Venus will be moving into Virgo in your 12th house of endings, of what it all really means and adds up to in the end, and of karma, of solitude or isolation, two sides of the same coin. So there's a lot of wrapping up for you this season, not only in that first house space, but being informed by what you're ready to let go of in the 12th house before Venus is renewed in your first house and comes home to Libra. Okay, and we've got our fun dice here that we'll be consulting to help us make it all make sense. So we'll just go ahead and pull a few cards here and we'll get started. Boop. Okay. So some themes opening up for you this season, Libra. Okay. Lots of cups and a sword, right? I guess it would not be Libra season for you, Libra, if we didn't have a sword in here to match justice. Okay. Lots of cups going on here. Lots of cups going on here. These are two very unsure cups, and this is a very certain cup. So what I'm sensing right off the bat here is there's a role that we've been playing, and I'm thinking about that Venus trine to Jupiter that I mentioned in the transits. Venus from Virgo will be entering into trine Jupiter in Taurus all summer. It's been a Venus square Jupiter summer. This will be a bit of a release in terms of those themes that were activated for us, which were a lot about trying to take on more than we can, trying to say yes to things we don't want to say yes to, trying to be more or embody more abundance than we had the energy to do. And so this is telling me that maybe you are thinking about what it is to show up emotionally for other people. From what place have you been doing that until now? And how has that role changed for you? Has it been reciprocal for you? Since we're coming out of a Venus retrograde shadow, I'm going to guess that some elements of how you demonstrate your emotions to others is not met equally, right? We're setting something right. We're resetting a balance here. So the Knight of Cups is super romantic, is very demonstrative, really wants to show people how it feels. And yet we've got these other cups showing us maybe the beginning and the end of a story here. The 4 is where we recognize that we have to invest in something emotionally in order to move forward with it. And we hesitate to do so. We stand or swim, float at the precipice of this foundation, of this configuration. And we know somewhere within us that it's only once we've invested emotionally that we stand to lose something emotionally. And we see this when the 5 follows this 4. Something has been spilled, something has been lost, and yes, there is something left over for us to continue on with, but we still need to take that moment to grieve. And there's also a feeling of, I knew it. I knew that this would happen. I knew that this would happen if I decided to put my heart into this. So there's some decisiveness in the 4 of Cups here about what it is we're willing to invest in moving forward. What is it that I have energy and emotion to give? And what do I want those investments to turn into over time if they've previously not been reciprocated or not been emotionally supportive to you in return? Then that only further anchors this feeling of hesitance when we are approached with another situation in which we're being invited to invest emotionally in something. And this is coming true in this 8 of Cups feeling, where we inevitably end up walking away from something that doesn't serve us anymore. Now, these are both goodbyes. Let's name that now. One of them is more emotional and one of them is intellectual or conceptual. So with this 8 of Cups, we again hesitate. This time we hesitate to walk away because of all we've invested. We hesitate here because we know that we're going to be pulled in deep and we don't want to have to do this later. Here we are having to do this, knowing that we can only open up to what we really wish for if we are daring and mature and wise enough to know when to walk away from what is no longer fulfilling us, right? If we think about what comes after this, it's the Nine of Cups, which is known as the wish card. And so that's what earns us those wishes. We don't just get to wish. We earn that right by, again, separating ourselves from emotionally, energetically, investment wise, from what no longer keeps our sails afloat, keeps our boat afloat, keeps our sails filled with wind. So it's so interesting to see these two cards together and to think about, again, that feeling of I knew it. I ended up having to walk away. I don't want to have to experience that again. And that's not the lesson, right? We are meant to continue to invest emotionally in the world around us, but we are doing so from a place of more integrity. We are doing so from a place that is here in the immediate, a walking away, right? And let's talk about this 6, because we see this person on the motorcycle sailing off into the sunset. Kind of fun to see them together, riding off into the sunset or sailing away, right? And so this is where we've made up our minds. This is where we reconcile our heart. This is where we reconcile our mind. I know that there's nothing left for me to fight over here, right? It's one thing when our hearts are wrapped up in what we've invested in, and we just feel like we really want to keep loving this thing, even if the sun is setting on it. But when we make up our minds is where that actually becomes activated. And preceding the 6 is the 5, where it's a lose-lose battle. No one's winning. We're all walking away. And so the 6 is, there's nothing left for me to argue about here. This is making me think about Mars in Libra, which is simply perhaps walking away. Perhaps I can't fight for something here in a way that's going to make headway or be respected or heard. And so the only power I have in this moment is to take myself away from that situation and to find where I'm going to be better suited. Okay, I definitely recognize where this overlaps with justice. Again, we're setting something right. You are meant to be someone who shows up for other people. You're a Libra rising. You want to create balance and wellness and happiness for those around you. You want to be that Knight of Cups, but not if it keeps you in a cycle of regret or resentment, emotionally speaking. And so it might be that the only thing you can do in this moment is walk away. And knowing that Mars is going to be moving into your 2nd house of your resources, your stuff, your skills, ruling that 7th house North node, I think that it's only going to, oh, well, hello Capricorn. It's only going to affirm for you your ability to get what you need at this time, even if it's not coming from those partnerships or those relationships that were not reciprocating to you. You're able to give yourself what you need at this time. Perhaps that's connected to Venus being in your 12th house as well, because Venus won't really want to hang out and make new friends until they cross the threshold of your ascendant and move home into Libra. That's a time where you'll be energetically ready to show up for other people, knowing that you're engaging in exchanges with others from this place of balance. So we have Capricorn here, we have Venus here, and we have 3, okay? Thinking about the Chariot, of course this is lining you up to help you reconfigure what you're motivated toward, what you have a drive to move into, what my instincts call for me to plunge ahead with needs to be updated about these narratives first, because I'm motivated to and driven to show up for people, again, to be the person in the world I want to see, who's advocating, who's finding ways to connect. And this needs to be able to kind of program the GPS to start driving you to those new places, driving away from the ones that don't reciprocate, that don't fulfill. So we talked about Venus moving into your 12th house, and it will do so from the 11th house of friendship. So that retrograde just took place in your 11th house of friends, communities, and hopes and dreams for the future. So whatever Venus was retrograde and revisiting in that 11th house space. I'm guessing we moved away from some friend groups. We moved away from some community values. We recognized the friendships that didn't recognize us and our individuality. And so Venus moving into the 12th is finding a way to make peace with all of that. It is mournful to move away from what we've invested in terms of our friends and our community, as well as what we think the future is going to look like. It takes time, Venus being in the background, that 12th house space, to mourn, to unravel all of that, and to kind of make peace with what we've moved away from, what it feels like to be in chosen solitude for this time, trusting that we'll be able to move into more balanced relationships moving forward. I'm thinking about how Pluto is stationing direct in your 4th house, and that's been so much about reconciling your emotional body. Who has had power over your emotions in the past? How has that shaped how you show up and engage with and trust your relationship to the cups as a suit? What agency have you developed at this time? All of these squares to Pluto from the planets in Libra will be happening from your 1st house. So this is you asserting more of yourself and butting up against that old programming that Pluto has been going back over in order to fully surface for you. Where are you playing nice in ways that actually make you more reactive down the line because there's not a foundation of mutual respect? And how have you unearthed things through Pluto that have allowed you to become conscious of those themes and become in charge of that dynamic? And 3, let's think about that 3rd house, which is Sagittarius. And that's being ruled by Jupiter hanging out in your 8th house. Perhaps when Venus moves through Virgo and makes a trine to that Jupiter in the 8th house, something opens up in your 3rd house of immediate environment, my neighborhood, my peers. So though we have said goodbye to friends, though we have said goodbye to communities, though we have had to reprogram what we think the future means, and I'm just noticing the correlation between these skies here and really just loving that. Sorry, my ADHD is like, ooh, a pretty, but just loving that they line up, right? So as we make that connection, something opens in the 3rd house that is a reboot of those relationships. We tend to make friends in our immediate environment, whatever that environment looks like. We can be visiting our neighborhood, getting back into some spaces that we haven't been in a while, maybe thinking about what kind of peers we want to be around and how that can shape some of the relationships we want to bring in moving forward, remembering that the North Node and the full moon are taking place or are in your 7th house of one-on-one relationships. So there's a broader conversation taking place here between all your social houses about what you want those relationships to look like, how they should feel, and where you can start over and create space for newness to come through. Okay, Libra, I'm rooting for you. This is going to be an impactful time, and I'm so excited to see what emerges from you over the course of this season. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, I would love if you could like it, share it with someone who may find it resonant, and subscribe. I can't wait to talk about Scorpio season and all of the new power you might feel yourself stepping into. So I will see you then. Welcome, Scorpio. Let's get a look at your forecast. Okay, so as we discuss the events of Libra season, we are seeing the sun, the new moon eclipse, Mars, Mercury, and the South Node all hanging out in your 12th house of karma, of endings, of what it all means in the end, of me and my maker, my God, my creator, whatever that looks like for you. Me and my experience with solitude and when it turns into isolation, 2 sides of the same coin. We are seeing Mars move into your 1st house of self and how you move through the world about halfway through this Libra season. So bully for you, feeling empowered. We see Pluto stationing direct in your 3rd house of peers, immediate environment, and the mind. We see Saturn and Neptune hanging out in your 5th house of love, affection, self-expression, and children, and play. We have the North Node as well as the full moon in your 6th house of time, routine, and the body. Jupiter and Uranus are hanging out in your 7th house of one-on-one relationships, be they friend, lover, business partner, or enemy. And that puts Venus moving into Virgo in your 11th house of friends, community, and hopes and dreams for the future. Okay, we also have our trusty dice here to help us make it all make sense. And we'll be looking at this through Justice and the Chariot. Okay, so we'll pull a few cards here and just see some of the themes that are being activated for you this Libra season. Okay. All right. Oh. Fun. We've got kind of an end of suits happening here, the beginning of court card energy happening here. So this Page of Pentacles is telling me that something is kind of emerging in the ether for you. Some idea or possibility about a new resource, a new relationship to resources, a new possibility, be it creative or financial or any other kind of abundance, whatever that looks like for you right now. There is something becoming possible, right? This leaf is emerging from the ether. It is not fully unfurled yet, right? If you can see that, it hasn't totally opened up as a leaf, so it's still new. And again, it's still connected to the ether, so it hasn't fully downloaded yet, but it's being initiated. This is making me think about that bridge between your 12th and 1st house and how Mars, who rules your chart, is going to be moving from that 12th house into that 1st house space as it comes home to Scorpio. I'm getting a thought about what you've been or what you will be processing, right? And Mars has been in Libra for a minute. So Mars has been doing some processing. You can think about this as like your chart ruler at the end of its year. You know, Mars travels at a different speed than the other planets, but it's kind of finishing up a cycle for you. Maybe actually think about it as a 2-year cycle, because Mars tends to take about 2 years to move across the entire chart. So there's something maybe even bigger than just Libra season alone that's being finalized and ending for you. But all of the Libra activity happening, kind of illuminating that 12th house space in a big way to see what is emanating from there, right? And we know Mercury will be moving into your 1st house at the end of Libra season as well. The 10 of Cups is a beautiful card to see. You're thinking about what makes you happy. That's probably partly because of all of the eclipse seasons you've navigated over the past 2 years, although I will say there is one final eclipse taking place in Taurus in your 7th house, and that will be during Scorpio season. So there's one final reveal kind of being catalyzed for you next month. But for the purpose of this season's narrative, we're definitely looking at what makes you happy, what makes you feel fulfilled in a way that you are able to share with those around you. The 10 is not the self, it is me and. So who am I sharing this with? Who am I emotionally connected to at this time that allows me to tap into this wealth of emotion? The 9 of Cups might tell us a little bit more about what this 10 of Cups looks like. The 9 of Cups is sort of colloquially known as the wish card. And it's not a carte blanche, like go ahead and just make a wish. It comes from the labor that we go through in the 8 before this card. that asks us to walk away from what no longer emotionally fulfills us. So there is some, and again, I'll come back to the eclipses, there is some process you've been through that has called upon you to release something that was no longer emotionally fulfilling. And that's opened you up this season to start vocalizing what it is you want in the place of what you walked away from. Ultimately, by making it known what we do want, by becoming conscious of and sharing with the moon here, as the moon is the great connector, right? So as we do that, as we speak that into being, we see it manifest. It's only once we can identify what that even looks like that we can know that we're feeling it. So I love thinking about you being in this process right now. And I love this Eight of Wands, which has a swiftness to it. There's action that's able to be taken this month. There are messages being able to be transmitted. And maybe that's some of Mars and Mercury both moving into your first house over the course of Libra season. It might be that as you're in this ether space, processing these things you've experienced over the last 2 years for Mars, and over the course of this season for the rest of the planets in Libra rather, you are able to get clear on what you separated from, both within yourself, that first house where the South Node eclipses were taking place, and in your relationships to others that were not fulfilling, being illuminated by the eclipses in your 7th house. That has helped you get clearer and get clear over the course of this season on what you want this to look like. And as soon as you get clear on this vision, or as this vision is coming to you, being able to suddenly make moves to start making it happen. So that feels positive. That feels very fruitful. And we'll roll these dice to see what else is coming up for you. But it makes a lot of sense that we're closing out a cycle in a way that is allowing you to make peace with and set things right. I think you've already done the work of, again, separating from those relationships that were not fulfilling or reciprocal, or where you were not showing up as your real self. And so this is the time where you're able to plant those seeds, I think. That might be some of the page. It's like planting the seed of what I see being possible for myself moving forward. And that absolutely connecting us with the Chariot, which is our drive and our instincts. What's motivating me? So if I'm no longer motivated by the need to fulfill something in the Eight of Cups that was not fulfilling me in return, then what is that allowing me to reprogram my instincts and my drive to pull me toward moving forward? Okay, we have Mercury, we have Libra, we have 11. Okay, yeah, absolutely. Mercury, again, hanging out in your, finishing up in your 11th house, okay, before moving into Libra and hanging out with the Sun and the South Node and Mars for this moment. And then moving into Scorpio, your first house, at the tail end of Libra season. So Mercury will definitely be playing a big part in this journey for you. Pay attention to that Mercury Cazimi, pay attention to the Mercury opposition to Chiron, and the square to Pluto, right, as it's moving through Libra. And thinking about Libra, of course, just giving more weight to and significance to the Libra transit that you're experiencing now. It's going to illuminate a lot for you, even though it's happening in sort of the backseat of your mind. It's absolutely going to highlight where you are holding on to ideas in Libra that you think are going to impact your sense of karma, or your experience of what it all adds up to in the end, whatever the end looks like and whenever it comes for us. And that's further emphasized by this 11, which I'm connecting to Venus moving into Virgo partway through this season. So I'm thinking about how Venus will be ruling that 12th house space from this 11th house space, which is the house of friends, communities, and hopes and dreams for the future. So as you've eliminated some of the past, as you've eliminated some of what you were invested in, Venus now has the opportunity to connect with new friendships and new communities while thinking about new ideas for the future and what they want that future to look like. Again, definitely making me think about, once I have visualized it, once I have sensed what is possible, I can start to communicate it and put it out there. Okay. Thank you so much, Scorpio. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, I would love it if you could like it, share it, and subscribe so that we can catch up next season when it's your turn, having the sun and all of the activity taking place in your first house. And we'll talk a lot about that final Taurus eclipse in your 7th house as well. So I hope to see you then. Hello, Sagittarius. Welcome to your Libra season forecast. As we talk about Libra season, we are seeing the sun, the new moon eclipse, Mars, Mercury, and the South Node all hanging out in your 11th house of hopes and dreams for the future, friends, and communities. We see Mars moving into Scorpio and your 12th house of endings, of karma, of what it all means in the end. We have Pluto stationing direct in your 2nd house of my resources, my time, my skills, and what I do to make my money. We see Saturn and Neptune hanging out in your 4th house of home, origin story, family, land, and emotional body. The Aries North Node and the full moon this season will be in your 5th house of love, self-expression, play, children. We have Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus in your 6th house of time, routine, and the body. And that leaves Venus, who will be moving into Virgo, and your 10th house of legacy, career, and reputation. Okay. And we also have our trusty dice to help us make it all make sense and shed any light on anything we're unsure of. Okay. Let's go ahead and pull a few cards to see what you're going through this month. Okay. I said going through, and okay. Well, it doesn't look like you're going through too much that is difficult or frustrating. Okay, so this 10 of Wands certainly is the maybe most arduous card in this pull this season. It's certainly highlighting where you are feeling burnt out. You are filled with passion. That is the Wands suit for us. We are driven, we are guided by some fire within us that pulls us towards something, some experience we want to be a part of. And when we reach the 10, while the 10 is the culmination of each suit, the 10 of Wands is an ending in the recognition that our commitment to our passions never end, or else they die. So there's some understanding that unless we keep going with this drive, whatever we're passionate about will lay in wait, will end without us. We are the one that keeps it going. And so the 10 is an invitation to put down what no longer drives you. Definitely getting a sense of this Chariot influence here, which is all about our drive and motivation. And what it is you need to step out of so that you don't allow this fire to take down everything it's connected to. If we wear ourselves too thin, we create cracks in this foundation and the fire sneaks out and consumes the very container that holds it. So there is a need to take a step back, and that may absolutely be connected to Mars moving into your 12th house, as well as Mercury at the end of the season. Mars here will be acting behind the scenes. Mars will not be really a team player while it's in your 12th house. And so that might be for your benefit. You're able to do some things on your own. You're able to kind of carve out, again, it's home in Scorpio, so it's able to strategize. And you may be able to put things down that no longer compel you, that no longer light you up inside, and do so in some sense of privacy. There's definitely a need to put something down so that the whole structure doesn't crumble beneath this raging fire. The Six of Pentacles is pointing us towards some sense of equity. Maybe there's been a lot that you've been committed to and no one else has been willing to kind of be generous in return in terms of some type of resource for you, right? This is typically portrayed as one figure, one human figure standing in front of several kneeled figures, and distributing some sort of wealth. And there may be some realization around where you have been the generous giver and where you have been the one in need. Now, neither of those is bad, even though the original portrayal of it certainly looks a little demoralizing. To be in need is not a bad thing. It is bad if you are taking on more than you can carry and you're not asking for help where you need it. This can often be a card about needing to delegate something or put something down or get something off our chest. And maybe a couple of those are true. Maybe it's that you're doing too much and you've got a chip on your shoulder about not being helped. But if you're in any way part of the configuration of not accepting help, not being humble enough to ask for help, or wanting to be this giving figure for appearance's sake, then that is on you to get clear on and put an end to. But seeing this does make me think that there is a chance for some sort of reciprocity to occur this month if you're willing to open up to it. Now, these cards feel a lot more inviting and positive, if you will. That's in quotations. So the Four of Wands is an invitation to create an anchor place for our passion. It might be that we are moving in this order and we need to put something down and return to the place of focusing on what houses this passion. There is a call for celebration here. There's a call for setting boundaries around what we love, and that might be a necessary thing to go back to since we're here at the end of this suit and we are tired and we are drained. We need to kind of come back to what those walls look like and why we design them this way, whether or not these walls are appropriate to hold this fire anymore, and to get clear on that. We are having conversations this season about what that looks like. Are there connections to this space that are able to remind me of what I do all of this for and who can maybe help me feel a little more equity here? Are there people I feel safe asking for help now that I'm getting clear on where I don't accept it or where I don't open myself up to it? And I'm beginning to have those conversations. I'm starting to think about what that could look like. And I'm visualizing with other people what this could turn into over time. So it starts off maybe feeling a bit difficult, right? We have Venus in your 10th house of legacy and career having a conversation with Jupiter, your chart ruler, who is retrograde in your 6th house. So the energy for Jupiter is not present. The 6th house is like, keep showing up and doing that. And Jupiter's like, yeah, I can do it all. And retrograde, it's like, no, I can't. And trining a Venus who is not in a sign of abundance for Venus, and who is concerned with that reputation and what we're creating in terms of a legacy, that conversation might be pulling you to zoom back out a bit and recognize where you've signed up for what you can't actually fulfill, and what it is you want that legacy space to look like at this time. Mercury ruling that 10th house is hanging out in the 11th house in Libra, being ruled by Venus. And so there's maybe an ability to connect to some of those friends and communities in that 11th house space about what's possible for the future. And that kind of pulls us into this more fruitful narrative of who can I talk to about this? And who is having some of the same visions that I'm having? And where can I start to make those real outside of myself? Okay. Yeah, the South Node in that 11th house is definitely bringing your attention to friendships and communities that don't serve you, that you are recognizing you're no longer being held by, that don't hold space for your particular type of fire or whatever sort of values you hold in this moment in time. So that South Node will be triggered by the new moon eclipse. It will be met by Mars and and the Sun and Mercury. And so all of these occasions will occur for you to put something down. That might be the theme over the course of the month, is what else can I put down? What else can I put down? Let me move backwards in the numerical sequence here and get back to the basics and think about who I want to be here and what I want this space to look like. Taurus, again, coming back to Jupiter and Uranus hanging out there. Venus from Virgo will also trine Uranus. Mercury finishing up in Virgo is going to trine Uranus. So from that 10th house space again of, oh, I don't have to do this way. Oh, there's a new way for me to try this out and it doesn't have to look self-sacrificial like this. Amazing. Okay, so that's absolutely something to pay attention to this month for you. And looking at 7, we haven't really talked about your 7th house, Sagittarius, which is Gemini, but that's also being ruled by Mercury, as well as the 10th house that we mentioned already. And so that may mean that there's a connection between your workspace or legacy space in the 10th house that can be reconciled and focused in on in the 7th house of one-on-one relationships. So really hone in on who is doing what in your area, in your arena right now, and what kind of conversations you can have about, again, asking for help or not needing to be this whole tree, being in relationships that are more equitable for you and allow you to really tap into what you can do from this place of being grounded and rooted in the passion, not burnt out and overtaken by it. Okay, all right, Sagittarius, thank you so much for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this, I would really appreciate if you would like it, share it with someone who may find it resonant, and subscribe. And next season, we'll be talking about Scorpio and all of that fun 12th house stuff that we'll be seeing. So whatever Mars is sort of cutting away at there in that 12th house, we'll get to see illuminated by the sun moving through there with Mercury. All right, we'll see you then. Welcome, Capricorn. Let's get a look at your Libra season forecast. Okay, so as we talk about Libra season, we are looking at the sun, this new moon eclipse, Mars, Mercury, and the South Node all hanging out in your 10th house of legacy, career, and reputation. We have Mars making its way into Scorpio and your 11th house of friends, communities, and hopes and dreams for the future. We have Pluto stationing direct in your 1st house of self and how you move through the world. We're seeing Saturn and Neptune in Pisces in your 3rd house of peers, day-to-day life, local environment. We see the Aries North Node as well as that Aries full moon in your 4th house of home, origin story, emotional body. We've got Jupiter and Uranus both retrograde in your 5th house of love, children, play, affection, self-expression. And lastly, Venus is moving into Virgo and your 9th house of faraway travels, other cultures, higher learning, philosophies, and meaning making. Okay, And we've got our trusty dice here, and we'll give those a roll toward the end to make it all make sense and get a look at anything that we didn't touch upon already. Okay, let's go ahead and draw some cards. And we'll just pull a few of these and look at the themes that are showing up for you this Libra season. Okay. All right. Okay. Oh, some beginnings. Interesting. Okay. I guess we should check in and see how you are feeling, since we're starting with a Cups card. And if you've heard me talk about the Queen of Cups before, we usually talk about how the queens do things maybe internally or are internally motivated, do kind of maintain the theme of the suit for themselves, and kind of can demonstrate that suit outwardly as well. But it's the king who does more of the genuine externalizing and like the guiding others through that same process. So the queen may hold emotional space for the self and others, but is not necessarily trying to do that for everyone, right? It's much more about entering into a place of rhythm with these immediate emotions and holding space for them. So we are giving a lot of thought to, I'm thinking about maybe this 4th house north node, and that it is spending these 18 months calling you into a deeper relationship to your own emotions, to your emotional fortitude. And if your IC is here in Aries, you know, the 4th house in traditional astrology doesn't always line up with the IC the way that it does in other chart reading styles, like Placidus, for example. So you can have an Aries 4th house and have your IC in Taurus or in Pisces, for example. So if your IC is also here in Aries with your 4th house, then there are a lot of themes coming up for you about what resilience looks like when you are kind of left alone to your emotions. An Aries 4th house can be the blessing of having the space to do things on our own, but also the curse of having to do things on our own. And what I have made sense of this North Node journey so far is that there's been such a pull to focus on what other people are saying about us in the 10th house, that 10th house of reputation and legacy. If the 10th house space is overwhelmed, which we're going to guess it is if the South Node is moving through there, because we've had too much of something up there, then this North Node is calling you to spend more time within, learning how to trust your own emotions, learning how to hold space for your emotions. A Martian 4th house can be full of anger, full of rage, full of attempts to initiate that get squashed or that are disrespected or disregarded. And when I talk about anger and rage, those can originate from you, but since we're looking at the 4th house, we are also looking at where the origin story of those entities actually begins. What ancestrally within us has brought about these feelings? And Aries is a warrior. Aries is warrior energy. So some part of us has had to learn to be defensive as well as being offensive when we have an Aries 4th house space. We learned early on in our childhood that no one was going to do this work for us. No one was going to honor our emotions the way that we are learning how to. Okay, so we see this focus on this playing this part for ourselves, taking on this work of understanding our emotions, allowing our emotions to flow, whatever they may be, and doing so in a way that separates us from patterns we've had about listening to other people's opinions about our feelings, listening to other people's opinions about our home life or about what we need in this space. So if this has been difficult for you, if you're having a lot of lessons pop up here, which, let's bring up Chiron. Chiron's been moving through this space for the last several years now, really activating wherever you aren't able to do this for yourself. So now that the North Node is here, it's pulling you into this place of really learning how to do that. We definitely see where that connects with the Chariot. What am I driven by? This rage that's gone unanswered for decades. Okay, well, how has that been impacting the steering wheel that guides me toward life and how I, what I move through? If there's unchecked emotions that we're waiting for someone to hold space for, that only we can hold space for, then we're driving ourselves someplace unsavory. We're driving ourselves someplace unhelpful, and it needs to be set back into balance. I love seeing these new beginnings. The more we can root into this Queen of Cups theme of holding space for our own emotions, regardless of what other people around us are doing or saying about our emotions, the more truth opens up within us. The 4th house is a dark house, right? It is the most visible and accessible of the dark houses, the other two being the 8th house and the 12th house. And so we can become aware of new feelings in here, of new power, right? I joke a lot that the ace is the best of the suit because everything else gets harder from there. And we'll talk about that in a second. New revelations about who we are, about new truths that emanate from that emotional space as we create the space for it. It communicates back with us. There are new possibilities of being anchored and grounded here in this space. There are new possibilities of having more energy when we hold and create and maintain this space, right? And I love seeing new opportunities because we are looking at a time that is highlighting that 10th house space. So it's not that we get to be in the hidey hole of our emotions the entire month. We do have to answer to things outside of ourselves. We're just getting clear on what we answer to within ourselves first, and then what we give space to outside of ourselves beyond that. And that may be part of Pluto stationing direct as well. Pluto's been in a square to the nodes since it stationed retrograde and moved back into Capricorn earlier this summer. And so we are maintaining that hold. We're kind of wrapping that up now. That is starting to wane now that Pluto is going to be direct partway through this season and start moving away from the nodes. And so with Pluto stationing direct in your 1st house, what revelations of agency and power are you having about how you move through the world? If you want to be responsible for all these people outside of you, who's being responsible for the you inside of you, right? And this really illuminating that lesson of, oh, I can recognize these truths within me now that I feel safe and in charge of and receptive to my emotions. I don't want to say in charge of like we rule them, but rather I'm responsible for them. And I have access to new resources now, because if I acknowledge my emotional needs, that's going to point me towards resources that can speak to them. Let's address this 7, the awkward one in the room, the elephant, the 300-pound gorilla. This 7 is certainly pulling me back to that 10th house space. This figure is someone who's very concerned with how people see them, as well as whatever distortions they have created about themselves in order to see themselves differently than what they are. And that Libra is the most prominent part of your chart. Certainly shows that it's very important to you to have a sort of peaceful reputation or for people to think highly of you. However, if your concern is coming from a place that's causing you to be inauthentic in order to solidify a certain reputation, that's going to really come to a head this month. The new moon eclipse in that 10th house space is not going to really allow that to continue, because the whole goal of that south node space and that new moon eclipse is to create a sudden release of a desire to give an F about that reputation space. Now, of course, that does not mean go ham and like just, tear through people, places, and things, but it does mean that in the theme, in the goal of being the anchor for your own emotions, allowing these new truths to emerge and recognizing where new resources are appropriate
or available, of a shedding of a false self happens naturally. If I'm holding space for my own feelings, I don't need to act this way in order to get someone else to think something about me. We see Mercury moving into Scorpio, hanging out in Libra for the most part of Libra season, and then moving into Scorpio right at the end. And so we might want to focus on Mercury, who rules your 9th house, right? Who's ruling Venus, who will be moving into Virgo soon, while Venus is from that place ruling Mercury. And so it might be interesting to think about. Oh, I'm getting a download too about how Mercury also rules the 6th house. Okay, so it might be interesting to think about, where have I felt pressured to keep going and to keep up these illusions in my day-to-day world or in my routine world? And how does that connect to my sense of reputation? And what am I willing to let go of in that 10th house space that also facilitates a resolution in my 6th house space, as well as in my 9th house space, where I learn about other people, what I learned about other people, places, and things and spaces that makes me want to have a certain type of reputation. And what is Venus going to be tired of in that 9th house space that we don't really have the time or energy for? How does that free up this 7 of Swords? We have Aries, so again, absolutely highlighting the importance of that 4th house space and the full moon that will happen there. And thinking about the 12th house, which is Sagittarius for you. Okay, so thinking about what is kind of coming to an end, what stories you're ready to be done with, right? And we talked about how Libra season's starting on the heels of that 29-degree Sagittarius first quarter moon. Maybe that triggers something in your 12th house space that kind of trickles outward elsewhere. That 12th house space being secret enemies, being what we think it all means in the end. And if we think we've had to be someone according to a certain cultural standard, which is very Sagittarius, then that's informed what we've allowed ourselves to show up for as a Capricorn. And so what can we let go of there in the grand scheme of things that kind of releases us from maybe creating more karma, right? This could be a real game changer season for you. If we keep going down this path of following the 10th house and the reputation and the falseness, then we create more karma, right? The nodes are there, they're trying to push us in a different direction. If we insist on going that way, then that absolutely creates an obstacle for us down the line. Okay. Thank you so much, Capricorn, for your time. If you enjoyed this, I would appreciate if you liked it, shared it, give me a follow. I would love to see you next season when it's time to talk about Scorpio and all of that juicy 11th house material. So I'll see you then. Okay, Aquarius, let's take a look at your Libra season forecast. Okay, as we talk about as we talk about Libra season for you, Aquarius, we are seeing the sun, the new moon eclipse, Mars, Mercury, and the South Node all hanging out in your 9th house of faraway travel, of other culture, religion and philosophy, higher learning, meaning making. About halfway through Libra season, we'll see Mars moving into your 10th house of career, legacy, reputation. Pluto is stationing direct in your 12th house of karma, of what it all means in the end, of endings. We see Saturn and Neptune hanging out in your 2nd house of my resources, my skills, my values. That Aries North Node, as well as the full moon this month, will be happening in your 3rd house of immediate environment, of peers, of day-to-day life, and the mind. Jupiter and Uranus are retrograde in your fourth house of home, origin, story, emotional body. And lastly, we have Venus, who will be moving into Virgo and your 8th house of shared resources and psychological landscape. Okay, and we've got our trusty dice here with us to help us make it all make sense, make sure we've gotten all the information that we need for this season. Okay, and we will just pull a few cards here and get an idea of some of the themes that are showing up for you. Okay. Very lovely to see the Empress. Oh, we've got some majors. We've got some majors. Okay, and then some mids, some majors and mids. Very cute. Okay, I love the Empress. This is making me think about maybe Venus entering your 8th house. We know Venus just had this long retrograde in your 7th house. What a visible, annoying, frustrating, hurtful even place to have this Venus retrograde. You likely were disappointed by some of your partnerships, friends pulling away, romantic partners or possibilities becoming no more, needing to take space from some of these relationships. And so Venus is sort of getting a chance to cool off into your 8th house space of shared resources. And that's what I'm picking up on here for this Empress card. I'm thinking a lot about what Venus has the opportunity to do in Virgo in your 8th house. And the way that I talk about the 8th house is that I think of it as you may have heard me say this before, as a like private club, a lounge, if you will. And you don't get to control the guest list, but you do get to control the decor. You get to control the mood, the music, the lights, pretty much everything else on the menu for that space is within your control. So while you can't predict who's going to come into that space, you can get a better handle on what that space looks like so that it attracts the people you desire to be in there. And I'm getting this sense that Venus now moving out of this retrograde shadow, stepping into this Virgo space, has a chance to really focus on what you want this 8th house space to look like. I want things to be really well resourced and lush in here. I want things to feel really grounded and nurtured, and I want a sensitive environment. Whatever Virgo means for you, whether it's I want things to be really routinized, right? I need some routine in my 8th house space in order to allow myself to feel grounded as an Aquarius. Whether it's kind of, I want a space to get into the nitty gritty. I want to be able to get my hands dirty, whatever that means for you in an 8th house way. There's an opportunity this month to focus on that overhaul, and it will take longer than the time that Venus is there, but Mercury just had a retrograde through this space and really got a sense of what isn't or wasn't working there. That Venus now has an opportunity to come in and kind of redecorate, if you will. And let's think about the Sun, which rules Leo, which is very much highlighting that 7th house space. It's now going to be free of Venus soon, and you'll be sort of emerging as your true self in how you come across to other people. Whatever Venus experienced in that 7th house space allowed you to pull back any false energies you were giving there, hoping that they'd be received and reciprocated. The 7th house is where we kind of project onto other people what we want or are feeling or need or are experiencing. And so Venus pulling back a lot of that energy, as well as maybe the curtains, pulling back the curtains on what that mechanism looks like in there for you, may hopefully have you in a place where you are ready to emerge as a different person, as a person who's able to express their authentic self in one-on-one situations more readily. Someone who's been through the phase of the fog and the moon and is emerging, knowing that they've transformed and just feeling connected to a new day. So I love that energy for you, Aquarius. The 6 of Cups here has us thinking about the past in some capacity. It could be that we are reminiscing on something that was sweet, and I'm bringing my attention to your 4th house where Jupiter is retrograde. And maybe that connects back to the idea that Venus is redecorating or renovating your 8th house space. While it trines Jupiter from the 4th house, it may be reminding Venus of how things were in the past in that 4th house space of early childhood, of origin story, about what Venus wants to implement here in this Empress card in the 8th house space. Maybe there are some less savory memories from the past, as the 4th house can be full of, our origin story or our childhood, our early youth is not always pleasant for many of us. And that may be something that informs Venus. I don't want to put up with this thing anymore up there. I couldn't help it from the fourth house because we can't control our childhood when we are a child. So I couldn't help it then. I can reflect back on it. I can think about what I would take from that time, and I can think about what I would eliminate from that time. I can get a sense of what I want to eliminate from that time that actually is still present in how I share space with people in the present moment. And from here, I can either implement what I want from the past, or I can release what I don't want from the past. This Seven of Pentacles is a really lovely ending. I'm thinking about maybe some of this second house activity, my resources, my time, my skills, but I'm also thinking about Mars and how it will move into your 10th house of legacy and career and reputation. There's an opportunity for some power here, I think, in terms of assessing what that 10th house space is looking like right now. Remembering that Mars hasn't been here in about 2 years, even though it's been ruling it. And so you can take this time to assess how things are looking for you. Do I like how this is growing? Do I like the progress this is making? Do I like how these taste right now? Do I need to tweak the recipe at all? Do I need to adjust the soil, adjust the pH level, adjust the light? Let's think about all of the fun little Virgo gardening tasks, Taurus gardening tasks we can use here. But Mars from up there is able to get a sense of whether or not it's happy with what your current reputation is, what your current legacy is shaping up to be. And there's an opportunity here to pivot, to make moves, right? We talked about how Mars up here is in a place for the first time all year where it's been home and where it's able to tap into some collective emotions and get a sense of what strategies it wants to implement. So let's roll these and get a sense of what else we need to know. But I am seeing this as a big carryover into the Chariot in terms of what drives us, what are we moving toward, what direction do we want to be going in, right? And I love the kind of overlap of there's something internal happening within me, which is certainly tied to our drive and our instincts. If I'm getting what I need in this 8th house space, then it's going to make it much more likely that I'm able to pursue what I want outside of me in the Chariot world. And this 7 of Pentacles story about, do I even want to be going toward this anymore? Like, what was driving me to want a certain type of success or a certain type of progress? And as I get clear on what drives me, I'm able to course correct. I'm able to make things right about how this looks right now and what I want it to look like moving forward. This is the moment where I can make those adjustments. I can tweak things to the way I want them to be. Okay, we've got 7, we've got Sun, we've got Scorpio. Hilarious, the overlap here. I'm thinking about your 7th house. I'm also thinking about the 7 of Pentacles. If the state of your one-on-one relationships is not what you want it to look like, then that's absolutely a focal point for this time for you. Thinking about how the sun is moving through your 9th house now as we enter Libra season, kind of getting a broader perspective. This is the house of joy for the sun. So getting a broader perspective of where I want to be. Maybe you're thinking about where you might move to in order to have your relationships look the way you want them to look. Maybe you're thinking about what you want to learn or what sort of spaces you want to enter with like-minded people who are interested in truth finding and meaning making in order to get a better idea of what one-on-one relationships you want to be engaged in. And of course, we have Scorpio here, which is back to Mars, back to that I can see from here where I want to go next, and I have the agency to make that course correction now. Okay, thank you, Aquarius, for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, I would greatly appreciate it if you like it, if you share it with someone who may find it resonant, if you subscribe so that you can come back here next month and we can talk all about Scorpio season. Okay, thank you so much. See you then. Okay, Pisces. welcome to your Libra season forecast. As we talk about Libra season, we are seeing the sun, this new moon eclipse, Mars, Mercury, and the South Node all hanging out in your 8th house of shared resources, psychological landscape, ancestry. We will see Mars moving into your 9th house of faraway travel, other cultures, higher learning, religion and philosophy. We'll see Pluto stationing direct in your 11th house of friends, communities, and hopes and dreams for the future. We've got Saturn and Neptune hanging out in your 1st house of self and how you move through the world. That Aries North Node and this month's full moon in Aries are happening in your 2nd house of my stuff, my resources, my values, and what I do to make my money. We have Jupiter and Uranus both retrograde in your 3rd house of mind, peers, immediate environment. And lastly, we see Venus moving into Virgo and your 7th house of one-on-one relationships, be they friend, lover, business partner, or enemy. Okay, so we're going to pull a few cards here to see some of the themes being activated for you in this Libra season. And we also have our trusty dice here to help us make it make sense. Help me help you make it make sense. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what is on your plate this month. Okay. Okay. Lots of lines happening, lots of movement. I love the parallel here between the Emperor and the King of Cups. A lot of like movement and processing happening is what I'm seeing here. The Four of Pentacles usually shows us when we need more than we have. So we are kind of just holding on to what is currently available to us. We don't see much else coming in at this time. And from there, we feel kind of guarded, kind of protective of our resources at this time. There's absolutely, Saturn moving through your 1st house. Let's just talk about that, right? And stationing direct soon at 0 degrees of Pisces. So really just like going through all of your degrees. And that's a weighty feeling, right? Anytime Saturn is in our sign, it means that we are feeling slowed down. We are feeling pressured. We are feeling a heaviness. And so there's absolutely a feeling of, okay, I got to hold on to this. And maybe that's part of what the Aries North Node is bringing to you in your 2nd house is access to more resources, access to like deeper pockets in that sense. And so we'll see what that full moon brings up here. Thinking about this Aries energy, I think you're being motivated and called to kind of tap into your sense of authority. What authority do I have in earning? Let's come back to the idea of being a Pisces and think about how there's a lack of ego in Pisces. And Pisces often feels like whatever I have should be what we have. And so I don't feel so good trying to have things on my own, knowing that there are so many other people out in the world who don't have what I have access to now. That can be a really heavy, speaking of Saturn, influence. That can be a really heavy feeling because we are an individual. We do need to succeed and thrive and live and fulfill our destiny, our lives as an individual human, no matter how concerned we are with the kind of world outside of us and around us. Thinking about this King of Cups and seeing maybe some of the Neptune influence or even some of the Jupiter influence in your 3rd house, wondering if you feel a need to kind of hold space for other people's emotions to maybe your own detriment. okay? I mean, all Pisces want to be this King of Cups. And when it's from a healthy place, it's from a surplus. It's from a place of I've grounded in my own emotions and taken care of myself, and I've allowed myself to crystallize, and therefore I have this to give you. And when it's imbalanced, when it's when it's still kind of a shadow element, then Pisces wants to be this for other people without actually having that feeling of concreteness within themselves. And there's a desire for it to be mutual. I will hold this space for your feelings if you then also hold space for mine. And I want to see this sort of reciprocity because I haven't experienced that. And so if you are a Pisces who has taken on this role without having your own sort of inner core formed, then this is going to be a really exhausting time, an exhausting place. I'm definitely understanding all of these planets moving through your 8th house. What is like psychologically beneath the surface, or what's happening in your shared resources, right? That's reflecting back to this full moon and this North Node in the 2nd house about maybe what you personally lack because of what you've tried to give to or share with another in the 8th house. I want to maintain this peace. I want to maintain this balance by not having much for myself and pouring it all into what is shared with others. Okay, but the Libra South Node is begging you to recognize where that urge is creating a sense of imbalance for you. I love this ending on the 5 of Wands. There's this sense of, I have to fight for myself. I'm a contender. I keep saying that line. I'm not even a Rocky fan. But like, I am someone who has something to contribute. I am someone who has something to add to this. And again, the sort of egolessness of Pisces sometimes can feel like I'm one of many and therefore I shouldn't stand out, or it's not right for me to take up space in this way. And it is. You are an individual. You have individual needs. You have individual passion, regardless of the world that you live in. And of course, inspired by the world that you live in. And if anything, this might be a call to recognize that your way of holding space for the emotions of those around you and being this beam of light, being able to channel brightness from heaviness, is through taking a stand as your individual, competitive, unique, fiery self. Maybe that feels contradictory, but I think that's some of what you might experience with Mars moving through your 9th house. I'm advocating for what I believe in. I'm putting myself out there. And if anything, the best way for me to show up and help change the world and put something beautiful into the world is to advocate for that thing that I am good at, to put myself into the hat, put my name in the hat and put myself in the ring. Whatever these my Pisces has, like, I don't know what these expressions are. Put my name into the ring, like put myself out there. I got to dip my wand into the collective fire. I have to be willing to share what it is that only I can do here. So I think we're navigating some of the thresholds between self and other, between what feels like ego but is really just you being a unique individual person. And this makes sense tying in justice and the Chariot. We are resetting a balance, right? That 8th house is getting a big reset over the next 18 months with the South Node there. And what you share with others needs to be something that you have for yourself first. Otherwise, you are going to just be pouring outward and constantly empty, right? And this helps us get a better sense of what is driving you and motivating you. If you are feeling pulled in multiple directions because something unconscious is pulling you to give to others, while something conscious is maybe let me flip that. Something conscious is pushing you to give to others when you don't have it to give, and something unconscious kind of knows that we can't really keep going that way. So there's this sort of dichotomy between where I think I should be going and what's actually kind of pulling me in a different direction. So we're resetting that Chariot. We're resetting those instincts. Okay, yes, emphasis on the Aries and the second house. Okay, totally. And Mars, who's ruling that. Okay, so I think that when Mars is, Mars won't move into Scorpio until the second half of Libra season. So for that first half, Mars is sort of having to cut ties with bonds to other people, while having to just walk away from ties to others that are draining it. It doesn't necessarily have the strength to advocate for that second house until it moves into Scorpio. So what it can do for this Aries part of your chart in the meantime is to just separate from things that are draining, separate from things that are preventing you from crystallizing, separating you from the deep, like, pathological instinct to show up in that way when you don't have it to give. Okay, no easy feat, Pisces. I definitely know that this is tough work for you, and that's why we're seeing a major arcana card here, absolutely tapping into something bigger than just this season or just this month for you. And this is really a theme that you'll be navigating through 2024, right? The nodes don't shift until January 2025, so you've got quite some time to get a hang of what within you in the 8th house needs to go in order to create more space for you to bring in more of what you need so you can shift out of this feeling of lack. Okay, Pisces, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, I would really appreciate it if you would like it, share it with someone who might find it resonant, and subscribe. I hope to see you here next season when we talk about Scorpio and all that Mars action, and we get a look at how that second house is shaping up. All right, I will see you then. Welcome, Aries, to your Libra season forecast. As we explore Libra season, we're looking at the sun, this new moon eclipse, Mars, Mercury, and the South Node all hanging out in your 7th house of one-on-one relationships, be it friend, enemy, business partner, or lover. We have Mars moving out of your 7th house into your 8th house of shared resources and psychological landscape. We've got Pluto stationing direct in your 10th house of reputation, legacy, and career. We see Saturn and Neptune hanging out in your 12th house of what it all adds up to in the end, my karma, my experience with solitude, mental health. We have the North Node and this season's full moon taking place in your 1st house of self and how you move through the world. Jupiter and Uranus are retrograde in your 2nd house of my finances, my resources, my skills, and my values. And that leaves Venus moving into Virgo and your 6th house of time, routine, and the body. Okay, so we're going to pull a few cards here and get a sense of the themes that are being activated for you this month. And we've also got our trusty die here to help us make it all make sense. So let's go ahead and see what you got going on. Aries. Okay. All right. We've got some fire. We've got some pentacles. And then we've got this beautiful chrysalis here. So, okay. Well, first of all, I'm seeing this full moon in your 1st house as a bit of a 6 of Wands vibe. It's certainly a time to celebrate yourself and to be celebrated. This is when the sun is in your 7th house and the moon is in your 1st house. And so we're seeing the consequences is not the word I was looking for, but we see the results of how you are or have been navigating your relationships with other people. There's also this sort of theme of maybe Pluto stationing direct in your 10th house and some sort of possibility there that could be celebrated, something that you've been working on for some time, some overhaul you've been sort of moving through in terms of what your legacy looks like, right? That all kind of maybe becoming clearer to you now that Pluto is going to be stationing direct. and finishing up these final degrees in Capricorn. So there's certainly this, between the first house and the 10th house, there's a lot to be celebrated for. And again, this is lighting up in your first house, right? So it is about you. And with all the other activity happening in your 7th house, it's very possible that the people you are close to want to celebrate you for something. I can't tell you what, but there's, again, lots to be celebrated here. So that might be kind of like contradictory to this chrysalis energy. So let me come back to that in a moment. Let's look at the connection between the 6 of Wands and the Page of Wands. And even with this 8 of Pentacles, there's something here about, I have done this successfully, and maybe that gives me a new idea. I am being celebrated, and that gives me impetus to share something else that I've had on the back burner, but now is ready to be revealed. So there's a continuance here of, I am being celebrated, and it creates the opportunity to open up to what's next for me. There's also this putting something into practice, right? The 8 of Pentacles is about, and that's where I'm seeing perhaps Venus moving into your 6th house partway through this Libra season, and Libra, of course, being ruled by this Venus. So that adds an element of coworkers to this mix as well. The 6th house can be where our coworkers lie. They're not quite business partners. They are people we kind of go into the office with on a regular basis, whether it's the physical office, the virtual office, whatever that looks like for you. So with Venus moving into Virgo, there's absolutely a focus on routine, on getting something prepared, on getting something kind of regimented here so that it can be replicated easily. This could be a sign of, okay, my idea was a hit and now it's going into production. All right, that's a pretty straightforward kind of capitalistic take on this, and that's absolutely possible. It's, you know, I've been working on this and my team is celebrating my success. It's a hit, and so we're going to go ahead with it and like make it real. Make it real. Turn the wands into pentacles. And this could just be something personal for you. It could be that, okay, this is working out and it's yielding new ideas, and so I'm going to go ahead and make this success into something kind of more regular, more sustained, and that's going to help me create more space for what's new and coming in hot. So there's a couple different ways to look at all of this. Let's weave in the chrysalis here, who's kind of the odd one out. This all seems very active, whereas the chrysalis feels very passive. And maybe that's to do with, let's see, Mars hanging out in your 8th house, right? Kind of being behind the scenes or doing something within the psychological landscape in that Scorpio house. And that is your chart ruler. And so it might be that for Libra season, or for this time that starts with Mars moving into your 8th house, there might be some time where you are kind of taking a step back from something, taking a step back from being visible, right? And again, the contradictory energy of that full moon happening in your 1st house, while Mars is going to be moving through your 8th house soon, you know, this external, internal process. And maybe there is a little bit of give and take here that's happening, a little bit of ebb and flow with what I'm putting out physically and the time I'm taking for myself to kind of reframe my perspective. The chrysalis is sort of indicative of like a solid chunk of time spent in this internal space. Maybe the chrysalis is what is allowing this to happen. Perhaps you're within this framework of this cocoon and you're doing this work, and when you come out, there's a celebration and newness is upon you. Again, you'll have to tell me in the comments like what's really ringing true for you here, but there's certainly an element of, I am ready to dissolve something old in order to get a sense of what's ready to be discarded. And that feels very 8th house to me. That also feels very Saturn and Neptune in your 12th house, right? Saturn moving through your 12th house is technically in its joy because it doesn't have to say yes to anything. It's able to just build within the subconscious. So it's not really responsible for having to like produce much in the outer world. And so that may be some of this energy that you're tapping into here. Saturn ruling that 10th house space, right? Ruling your midheaven, potentially, but ruling that 10th house of legacy and career and reputation from within the 12th house, Saturn doesn't care so much about what other people think of it. And so maybe that ties into this contradiction as well. I'm being celebrated, but maybe I only want to be celebrated by those closest to me, because the people in the broader world at large and what they think of me doesn't matter so much at this moment. So there's something kind of internal happening. There's a process of suspension and taking time away from the tangible world to allow or initiate a process, like a deconstruction process. And yet there's also something happening very tangibly out here in the visible realm, and a sense of productivity. Maybe it's by doing something routine, you create the space for this kind of disconnect and reframing, right? We as humans kind of need mundane activities in order to kind of untangle the web that is our 12th house. And that's some of what the 6th house, 12th house is about. I need something to do tangibly. I need to maybe master something within my physical realm in order to create the space in that mundanity to allow for something surreal to unfold. So let's take a look at what the dice have to say. But I do love the idea that, oh, someone wanted to say hi, and it's the number 1. Okay, so really emphasizing that first house, really emphasizing what is feeling good for you, and also taking rest. A full moon in the first house can be really tiring, right? The 6th house is the body over time, and the first house is kind of what is just in our bodies that we're aware of. And so you may feel really tired in this moon, and it might be time to take a break and celebrate what's been done. Jupiter in Taurus. You know, it's funny. I kept looking at that Jupiter in Taurus and thinking, like, what is this? What does this have to do? All right. So, you know, Jupiter in Taurus is retrograde in your 2nd house. Everything in your 2nd house is retrograde right now. Maybe that is making you feel like you don't have a solid source of income coming through, or you're reconsidering what you want to be doing to make your money. Jupiter, again, this time in Taurus gave us so many potentials, gave us so many, like, possibilities. And Venus, both before retrograde and then during retrograde and then lastly after retrograde, really like exaggerated that Jupiter energy. And it may have felt like, okay, I'm going to do all of these things. And perhaps even, you know, being in your 5th house, Venus was kind of tugging on your chords of self-expression, or maybe even having children, right? So there's some push and pull between how am I going to create what I'm creating and also pay for it in the 2nd house. And that Jupiter is ruling that Saturn in Pisces in your 12th house. So there may be a broader story of, well, I don't want to just throw myself into this opportunity to make this money because I don't think it actually connects to what I want my legacy to look like. And yes, there is something like productive and sustainable that's here. And maybe I can do that for the meantime while I reconsider what I want this bigger picture thing to look like. Saturn will station direct in the next several weeks, and Jupiter will station direct by the end of the year. So it kind of makes sense that we're seeing a major arcana card. It's bigger than just this Libra season. And we can see where this connects with Justice and the Chariot. Justice in the 7th house, right? Your Libra house, and where that South Node is. We are correcting some connection to someone else. We're correcting, or maybe even separating from a business partner, from a romantic partner, or friends, or something of that element. And in doing so, you are focusing more on yourself, on that 1st house, and getting a sense of where you want to be going without the influence of another, right? And that is absolutely correlating with that Pluto stationing direct in the 10th house and saying, what power does my reputation have? And what do I think about what people think about me? What do I want to think about when I think about that space? So absolutely seeing that connection between what others think of me in the 7th house, or who I have partnered with in the 7th house, and what needs to be corrected there in order for me to really know what I'm moving toward, so that my 10th house space looks the way I want it to, not the way that someone else does. Okay, all right, Aries, go ahead and I wanted to curse just then. Go ahead and stir some things up. See what comes out this month. And I'm really excited to see what becomes kind of activated for you as an individual. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, I would appreciate a like, a share, a subscribe. I would love to see you here next month to talk about your ruling planet moving through its home sign of Scorpio and what that opens up for you. Okay, see you then. Hello, Taurus. Welcome to your month ahead forecast. All right. As we explore Libra season, we are looking at the Sun, the new moon eclipse, Mars, Mercury, and the South Node all hanging out in your 6th house of time, routine, and the health of the body. We'll see Mars moving into your 7th house of one-on-one relationships, business partners, friends, lovers, enemies. We are seeing Pluto station direct in your 9th house of philosophy, religion, higher learning, beliefs, other cultures, and faraway travel. We have Saturn and Neptune hanging out in Pisces in your 11th house of friends, community, and hopes and dreams for the future. The Aries North Node and this season's full moon are in your 12th house of karma, of mental health, of solitude, and what it all adds up to in the end. We've got Jupiter and Uranus both retrograde in your 1st house of self and how you move through the world. And lastly, we see Venus moving into your 5th house, its house of joy, which is your house of self-expression, of play, of affection, and children. Okay, and creativity. Let me put creativity in there. It's important. All right, so we are going to pull a few cards and get a sense of the themes that are coming up for you this Libra season. And we have our trusty dice here as well to help us make it all make sense and make sure we're seeing all that we need to see now. Okay, we've got some big energy coming through here. All right. So, we love to see the star. Like, let's just, she's not first, but we're going to start there because it's also our major arcana card for the season. So, I love this for you. You've probably been through it, being Venus ruled. And Venus was retrograde in your 4th house for about 1,000,000 years. That 4th house of emotional body, of home and origin story, of land. And so I imagine you had some disconnect from that home space, perhaps some disappointment, some uncertainty, Venus not really knowing where to go. And so with Venus finally finishing up this retrograde shadow and moving into your 5th house, which is again its house of joy, it's going to be trining your ascendant and bringing you just a lot of calm and pleasure where there's been dryness and scarcity. Okay, so even though Virgo is not a sign that Venus thrives in necessarily, it is a sign that urges Venus to get creative. And so this is a time where you are able to create the pleasure that you desire and express yourself in a way that is just perceived really easily and fluidly by others. And that's part of what Venus loves about being in the 5th house. I express myself and I receive affection. I express myself and people appreciate me. So I think there's a really big coming home to yourself, coming back into yourself, feeling like you're emerging, right? The star happens after this wild tower moment. And I imagine that Venus retrograde was a very just a long stretch of tower moments for you. So there's something really refreshing here in this star, just being seen as yourself, emerging in wholeness and feeling really authentic and appreciated. The King of Swords here. Making me think about Pluto in that ninth house, that house of beliefs, and the sword journey, especially reaching it here at the end, is one of mental mastery, becoming very organized and representative of some form of information, right? I have been through all of the files, okay? I have gone through all of the difficult emotions and processes. Because let's remember, the swords is not an easy suit. It is one that starts off strong and spirals into chaos until everything sort of ends and finally can start over. So, as the king, you've been through that process. You've been through this journey of kind of needing to understand what's in your mind, what shapes your mind, what influences your mind, and gain a sense of control over that process. So that's giving me really strong Pluto vibes. Pluto has spent about 16 years in Capricorn. So Pluto's been for the past 16 years hanging out in your house of beliefs, making you question everything you know. Who taught me this? Where did this story come from? Why is it so pervasive in my mind? Am I talking about things that I don't believe in? Okay, that's a really long, deep, pervasive journey. Pluto being in such a like visible space where other people are sharing their ideas and you're having to really think about the power of those ideas. So I love thinking about Pluto stationing direct here. It will pop back in here one more time at that 29th degree next year before it goes into Aquarius for good. But this last pass for Pluto has been very clarifying about any final things that are within that belief space that have been impacting you in a harmful way, giving away your power, contorting and distorting who you think you are in the world, right? Okay, so I love thinking about like you finishing this process and recognizing that you have the power to pull this sword out of the stone. And then we've got this fire energy, which feels really fun for you. Okay. So the Knight of Wands is ready to express. That could be, again, Venus being in the fifth house, being in its house of joy and saying, like, nothing's holding me back now. I'm able to share what I need to share. I'm able to say what I need to say. I want to make a grand gesture. I want to demonstrate my knowledge and my wisdom. And so I want to be out here sending something out into the world. There is something impulsive about the Knight of Wands. It is not the Knight of Pentacles, which is putting in that like steady work repeatedly. The Knight of Wands is lit up and then takes off. Okay, so maybe you're being invited to step into some spontaneity, or perhaps maybe you are in a process of understanding what feels impulsive for you to express right now. And that's making me think about Mars moving into your seventh house, right? Returning home to Scorpio for the first time in a couple of years, being in its own sign for the first time that we can remember. And so there's something about, okay, I can take action here in this house that I experience with other people. I can act on behalf of someone. I can tell someone how I feel. Okay. And I love this Seven of Wands. The Seven of Wands is such a great energy. It's like I have been, and this is making me think about Venus in the fifth too. I have this, okay? I demonstrate this. I created this. I put my heart into this. I champion this, and no one can take it from me. And maybe that's some of, you know, I want to weave in this sixth house because it's also being ruled by Venus in your fifth house. And so maybe there's something, and let's weave in some of the themes of justice. Maybe there's something that needs to be corrected within your house of time, routine, and the body that is being championed by Venus moving into your fifth house. I actually don't need to, I don't need to prove I don't need to prove anything in my sixth house right now. I've done the work, okay? Look, I'm up here. I've done the freaking work, okay? So I can defend my honor. I can defend everything I have created at this point, knowing that other people either want what I have created, or want to see me come down from up here, right? To take my place. That's also connecting me back to this King of Swords. I understand how my narratives and the information I've been exposed to has shaped me, but it does not own me. I carve out my own beliefs. My power is in what I know to be true, and you can't take that from me. You can't take that from me. So I love that. As I'm coming back to what I just said about like proof. I don't have to prove anything. Okay, let's talk about Capricorn, where, yes, exactly, Pluto again, this feeling of Pluto in Capricorn has helped me reframe everything I believe, and therefore I know that what I've done is good. I know that I can trust my thoughts and how I want to share them. I know that I'm being authentic because I've done this whole journey. And that's helping me set things right in my 6th house. Maybe there's something that you get off your chest. Maybe there's something that you have been working on so hard in the 6th house that you're ready to move on from. And all of this helps you understand what motivates you and calls you toward whatever is next. Knowing that you have an innate relationship to and power over what you believe in means that you are no longer subconsciously guided by the beliefs of others. And there's no need for this conscious and unconscious entity to be in a split anymore. We are fully in control of our own mind. This is who we really are. From here, we can put things out into the world, and I trust where I'm going next. Okay. Looking at Neptune and 2. Okay, so Neptune's in the 11th house of friends, community, and hopes and dreams of the future. It makes a lot of sense that what you are reframing for yourself mentally is shaping what you think is possible for yourself. Neptune up here might be sort of both confounding what's possible, right? There's so many possibilities, and Neptune's kind of making it all a blur, but also I have faith up here now. Neptune saying, I believe that I can transcend what I thought was possible here. And maybe there's also a separation from some friends, especially with Mars moving through the 7th house soon. I'm cutting ties with anyone who doesn't believe that I've done the work, or who needs more proof from me, or who wants to take what I have. And that's impacting who I see as part of my community, as well as what I think our future looks like. And let's talk about this. Let's okay. Thinking about your 2nd house, which is Gemini, okay? And Mercury is going to be ruling that house from the 6th house, right? It's currently finishing up its retrograde shadow in your 5th house, and maybe figuring out, okay, I needed to express XYZ a certain way in order to kind of make the money I needed in the 2nd house. So with Mercury now moving into the 6th house soon and meeting up with that South Node, there may be a revelation around, oh, I no longer need to do this anymore to keep my 2nd house full. Or maybe I want to do more of this self-expression in order to fill my 2nd house of resources. So some connection there between what's happening in the 6th house work-wise, what you've put your time and energy and routine into, maybe what your body and physical energy are now, and how that's going to impact that 2nd house space. Okay. All right, Taurus, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, I would love if you would give it a like, give it a share, and give me a subscribe. I would love to see you back here next season, where we'll talk about Scorpio and all that activity happening in your 7th house with Mars there as well. All right, so I'll see you then. Okay, welcome Gemini to your Libra season forecast. As we talk about Libra season, we are seeing the Sun, the new moon eclipse, Mars, Mercury, and the South Node all hanging out in your 5th house of self-expression, of love and affection, of play and children. We see Mars moving into your 6th house of time, routine, and health. We are seeing Pluto stationed direct in your 8th house of shared resources and psychological landscape. We are looking at Saturn and Neptune both hanging out in your 10th house of reputation, career, and legacy. We see the Aries North Node and the full moon happening in your 11th house of friends, communities, and hopes and dreams for the future. Jupiter and Uranus are both retrograde in your 12th house of karma, mental health, what it all means in the end. And Venus will be moving into Virgo, your 4th house of home, origin story, emotional body. Okay, we're going to pull a few cards and get a sense of some of the themes being activated for you this season. And we'll also roll our trusty dice to make it all make sense and see if there's anything else we need to know. Okay. Lots of sword action happening. Okay. Okay. So it's fun to see kind of sequential cards here. Certainly illustrates a bigger story. And so this Knight of Swords and this Page of Swords together are a chain reaction. I actually want to start with the 4 because I think this sort of leads us to these. So as a Gemini, you were certainly kind of going through it there while Mercury was retrograde. And sure, Mercury retrogrades 3 to 4 times a year, and so you're no stranger to changing direction. But this one in particular may have been rough since it was not only in one of Mercury's own signs and therefore potentially more chaotic. I know in one of my videos I said it wouldn't be, and it turns out I was wrong. It was definitely chaotic being in its own sign. But that was also in your 4th house of emotion, emotional body, origin story, home, and family. And so that may have been really particularly sensitive and tender for you. We're seeing a literal 4 here with the 4 of Swords, kind of overlapping with that 4th house retrograde. And so you may have kind of been keeping to yourself a bit during this retrograde. Maybe you were kind of carving out space, especially since Venus was retrograde in your 3rd house of kind of the mind and peers. And so maybe people in your neighborhood were not living up to your expectations, maybe some friendships, maybe some relationships amongst your peers, maybe your mind, right? The 3rd house is the mind. Maybe your mind was sort of under attack here with this lightning. Venus was retrograde there for so long. And so you may have had to kind of isolate a bit and take some space away from some of the conflict and kind of go into your private space, go into your own go into your own little cave there for a bit. And again, especially with Mercury retrograde in your 4th house as well, there's this sense of maybe I need to tinker around my house. Maybe I need to learn more about my origin story. Maybe I need to reconnect with my chosen family, my biological family, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe I'm rethinking who my family is. I'm taking a break from some of these things and I'm giving myself this space. I recognize that I'll have to come back out eventually and confront some of these things, but for now, I really need to rest. Okay. I'm also thinking about Jupiter and Uranus being retrograde in your 12th house as well, and that sort of electrifying, quite literally, right? With Venus retrograde in your 3rd house, squaring Jupiter and Uranus in that 12th house. Let me tell you, I know how draining that is. It keeps you up at night. It makes you ruminate. You have thoughts you never thought you'd have, or you never thought you'd have again. You have thoughts coming in from left field, right field. Where did this even come from? Why am I thinking about this? Okay. So absolutely needing like a mental reset for yourself. And perhaps through that, you've had to do some mourning, right? Retrogrades bring pain to the surface. Retrogrades make us revisit things and reflect on things and potentially grieve things. So the Five of Cups is, honestly, I'm sort of laughing because we could have seen the Three of Swords here. This could have been a bigger, just like a fully sword story. They're not dissimilar in the acknowledgement of something hurting. But the five here and being cups is much more disappointed, is more sad at what's been lost. And I mentioned some friendships may have been lost, some connections to family may have been reviewed, a lot of interpersonal relationships caught up in the retrogrades that we've just navigated. And those are important to you, Gemini. You love to connect with people in order to get a better understanding of your environment, in order to learn more about yourself. And so seeing those connections be fractured or severed in some way absolutely brings up this emotional grief of what has been lost. So you may be in this sort of tunnel for Libra season, kind of letting yourself grieve. It's important to allow yourself the space to mourn. Otherwise, we kind of end up back in this place of, wait, feelings I didn't think I would have again are resurfacing because I tried to suppress them. But as you move through this tunnel, remembering that you are moving through it and toward this light that's there on the end. So giving yourself this space in order to grieve and mourn what needs to be grieved and mourned. And entering into this narrative of what is next. Something about your world has come to light, some truth is what I'm imagining, or at least some recognition that something you thought was one way is not. And now you're in a place where you're not only ready to open up to new truths, but you are interested and invested in pursuing them yourself. So here we are recognizing the previous limitations that we existed within and recognizing that through play, especially for you, Gemini, through play and curiosity in this kite, we can break through these previously perceived limitations and explore what exists beyond them. This hawk being sort of on the threshold of this final barrier and representing the freedom that exists beyond what we think we know. And the knight then being the one to break through those chains and to say, I'm going to go find it. I'm going to go find this new, I'm going to go find this new information. All right. And I love that. I love thinking about all of this activity happening in your fifth house, right? The south node there certainly suggests that some element of how you love and offer affection and also play is ending. And it may be that some romantic ideal or some romantic reality is or has shifted for you, especially since Venus in that third house retrograde was ruling that fifth house space and is now ruling the south node that lives there. And so there's certainly something about loss here in the fifth house. I thought I could love this way. I thought I could love this person. I thought I could express myself and be accepted. I maybe have not. And so I am pushing beyond what has been to learn what else is out there for myself. And that's making me think about the Aries North node in your 11th house. I am, and that full moon as well. I am pushing beyond what I've known to see what's possible for the future. I am investing in new friend spaces. I am seeking out new communities. I am forging new ideas about what I want to be possible, all because I'm pushing through whatever my previous limitations were regarding those things. And seeing where this ties into justice and the Chariot, if you've been driven or driving toward or motivated to sustain relationships that are not what they truly are, not what you thought them to be, then that's absolutely something that needs to be set right in this sort of social airway and allow for deeper integration of what is true for you moving forward. Okay, we've got Capricorn, we've got 8, we've got the North Node. I love that. Let's emphasize that North Node in the 11th house, right? Let's think about what's possible out there. Letting go of what has been, moving into what I can seek out for myself now. And you love learning, okay? So get out there and go learn, go find what is going to call to you, what's going to ignite within you and motivate you in a way that feels good to you. Pluto is stationing direct in your 8th house, and that's Capricorn. So there's absolutely Pluto tones here of really getting an understanding of those shared resources. What do I share with other people? And what power do I give away there? What power have I told myself I don't have and that I need to give to others in order to be safe? And how has that limited me? Where am I learning as Pluto finishes up in these final degrees, where my own perception of maybe my power or what I am in duty of to others really says about what I believe and not necessarily or what I've been taught, right? And that might be some of the fourth house retrograde of, wait a minute, where did this come from? Why did I think I had to share this in this way? Why did I give that power away? Maybe it begins with my origin story or my family in some capacity. And 8, your 8th house, absolutely. So that 8th house Capricorn space being super important, and Pluto really giving you some gifts as it finally finishes up here over the next several months. But in this direct station for now, it's certainly giving you something powerful for you to go learn what's next for you. Okay, Gemini, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, I would love if you liked it, shared it, and subscribed. I'd love to see you back here next season, and we'll talk about all of the Scorpio activity. All right, see you then. Hello, Cancer. Welcome to your Libra season forecast. Okay, so as we talk about Libra season, we're seeing the sun, the new moon eclipse, Mars, Mercury, and the South Node all hanging out in your 4th house of home, emotional body, origin story. All right. And did I say emotional body? Maybe I said that twice for you, Cancer, because you've got so many emotions. We are seeing Mars move into your 5th house of play, affection, self-expression, and children. We see Pluto stationing direct in your 7th house of one-on-one relationships, be they romantic, business, friend, or enemy. We have Saturn and Neptune hanging out in your 9th house of beliefs and philosophies, religion, higher learning, travel, other cultures. We see the Aries North Node as well as this season's full moon happening in your 10th house of career, legacy, and reputation. Jupiter and Uranus are retrograde in your 11th house of friends, communities, and hopes and dreams of the future. And lastly, we see Venus moving into Virgo and your 3rd house of peers, siblings, immediate environment, the mind, the neighborhood. Okay. So we're going to pull a few cards to get a sense of the themes being activated for you this season. And we'll also be rolling our trusty dice to make it all make sense and see if there's anything else we need to know. Okay. Oh, we've got some major cards coming through. Okay. So, I'm so curious, what is lining up for you this season, Cancer? We see the Magician here, which is, the Fool is the opening of the journey, but the Magician is 1, like the first real number. And so this certainly connects with ideas and having the tools line up to make them happen, having all of the components for the recipe and being able to finally put them all together and create something potent, something important, something real and tangible for yourself. We see the Hierophant, and that's making me think, the Hierophant is a Taurus card, but it's making me think about your 9th house where Saturn and Neptune are. And I can certainly see a link there between that 9th house and that 11th house where Jupiter and Uranus are in Taurus, because whatever we believe in the 9th house, whatever reality we have come to define with others, shapes what we think is possible for the future, shapes what we hope and dream for the future, shapes the friends we spend time with and the communities that we're a part of. So all around, there's a big emphasis on these kind of houses above the horizon that are asking you to tune into what it is that you currently believe in. What's your belief system right now? Maybe Saturn and Neptune there are really distorting what you think is real, or pulling you away from defined realities that others believe in or have kind of bought into. And maybe that's putting some pressure on you in terms of, again, what you think is possible. All of those oppositions that we've had from Virgo to Saturn have been from your third house into your ninth house. And so what you think in your immediate environment and what is affirmed by that environment ultimately shapes what you believe in the bigger picture of things. And Saturn being there is sort of limiting your feeling of belief in what's possible, and everything opposing from Virgo is just trying to get a sense of what is real then. If it's not that, then what is real for me? And maybe that's where this Three of Swords comes in. There's certainly some grief here in the Three of Swords. Some reality is being shattered or has been shattered. Some truth, some belief, something we desired, something we wanted, something that was once beautiful and calm is being disrupted. And so certainly I'm thinking about that third house, ninth house axis and how that is really difficult. We are grieving something that is kind of going on for us mentally, and all the more reason to focus on what it is we can put our faith into. And maybe that looks like seeking a mentor or being a mentor to someone. It is often through the exchange of knowledge that we rebuild our sense of faith, right? And seeking out knowledge from a mentor can be really empowering for you as you're clearing out via Saturn and Neptune some of the other broader belief systems that you are separating from. And sharing your knowledge with someone can absolutely remind you what it is that you believe in, and can instill in you a sense of strength in that knowledge that you do have that is able to be shared. So there's something being mourned, absolutely. Take time for that, and let's bring our attention to all the activity in your fourth house this season. That's the most, private, conscious space within us. That's where we see our feelings, right? And when we're at home by ourselves or with family, whatever family looks like for us, is when we get to be ourselves. And yet the South Node moving through this space is pulling some part of that away from you. It's trying to extract some sense of self, some imbalance from that fourth house space. And that may be some of this Three of Swords as well. Something about your origin story, something about your lineage or your home life is ending, and that's being illuminated in the new moon eclipse. And that may certainly absolutely trigger some painful revelations, but it's important to face those and to allow them to be what they are and to process those. Coming to this Ten of Pentacles, this is a beautiful omen to kind of finish the line with. I got thirsty there. And so, talking about Cancer, I have to drink the water. So this Ten of Pentacles is maybe some of the grief that is being dislodged or being exposed now. The way we wanted things to be, maybe a Libra fourth house is one that really seeks balance at home. And that can mean sacrificing some of ourselves in order to create or contribute to that balance. And so there may be a sense of, I've been doing this in order to keep peace with those I share this space with. I've been doing this because I thought that was what I needed to do in order to have this with other people. And what we'll recognize this month is that that's not true. Either that's a false sense of balance that's holding you back from being able to create something important to you. Perhaps you have bought into something that you don't actually want, that isn't actually the home life that you need at this time, and there's some sort of disconnect necessary from that origin story in order to really get a glimpse of what we want this to look like. And that's bringing me back to that 11th house, that Jupiter and that Uranus in the hopes and dreams of the future space, as well as thinking about that North Node in your 10th house, right? You're separating from something in your home life in order to move into a new arena in your 10th house, which is that career and that legacy you're creating. So it does require being separated from something in the past or from the past in order to be able to move into that space. And thinking about Jupiter and Uranus in the 11th house, they're both retrograde, and what you thought you wanted, this feels like a very like dream vision in Taurus. I want this sort of life for myself. That's my hope and dream for the future. It may be that there's something false within that narrative that is being reconfigured, reconsidered, re-examined. You are maybe chasing a dream that was never yours to chase, you didn't actually want, was informed by something we believed in that we no longer believe in. 11, okay, so we're definitely looking at that 11th house space. And, you know, Uranus has been there for some time, so that may be some of the revelations here too, is that hopes and dreams of the future are constantly changing. Hopes and dreams of the future and what's possible up there is being disrupted. And now it's coming to you through these very personal 4th house revelations this month. Mars and Aries. So again, that 10th house space moving into what you're here to do also does require perhaps reflecting upon and separating something about where you've been, where you came from, what that story holds for you at this time. And Mars is in that 4th house space now and kind of serving to help sever you from that node, and it will move into your 5th house of self-expression to kind of help you connect more to these powerful energies here this month. Okay, Cancer, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, I would appreciate if you gave it a like, shared it with someone who might find it resonant, and subscribe so that we can see you back here next season to talk about Scorpio and all that activity happening in your 5th house. All right, I hope to see you then. Hello, Leo. Welcome to your Libra season forecast. As we talk about Libra season, we are seeing the Sun, the new moon eclipse, Mars, Mercury, and the South Node all move through your 3rd house of peers, siblings, immediate environment, neighborhood, and the mind. We'll see Mars move into your 4th house of home, origin story, lineage, land, and emotional body. We'll see Pluto stationing direct in your 6th house of time, routine, and health. Saturn and Neptune are hanging out in your 8th house of shared resources and psychological landscape. The Aries North Node and this season's full moon will be in your 9th house of travel, foreign culture, philosophy, religion, higher learning. Jupiter and Uranus are retrograde in your 10th house of career, legacy, and reputation. And Venus will be moving into your 2nd house of my resources, my skills, my values, and what I do to make my money. Okay. We're going to pull a few cards to see what themes are being activated for you this season, and then we'll also roll our trusty dice to make it all make sense. Okay, here we go. Oh, fire, fire, fire. Okay. And cups, cups, cups. Very fun. I love this. What a beautiful palette that really goes with these blues and purples. Okay, so we have a vision, right? Venus is finally done with that retrograde in your 1st house. All right, moving on. We're tapping into not only the vision, but being able to execute it, being able to guide others, lead others. I'm kind of thinking about Jupiter in your 10th house. Maybe this is an upright card for you. Maybe this is something that you are finally kind of able to tap into this season, thinking about that 3rd house, 9th house axis being lit up and kind of like recognizing what you are creating, what big picture thing you believe in that you're able to kind of motivate others to move toward. That's a very ninth house full moon energy. Okay, and if this is feeling less than upright for you, that could be Jupiter in your 10th house, kind of getting you to think about what this looks like for you. What vision am I championing? What am I bringing to fruition up here? What do I want to guide people toward? Okay. The Nine of Wands is this perseverance, right? We are this little car on this giant, massive, winding road, and we are always moving toward what we are seeking. We are always, or we need to always be kind of moving forward. And I like to think about, I know the road is long, I have to keep going. And so, like, what treats do I need for the road? Let me make sure I have my snacks. Let me make sure I've got the good music. I've got to tap into what is going to keep me moving along this pathway, recognizing that it is so long. I'm thinking about Pluto stationing direct in your 6th house. That's been a big journey over the past 16 years for you in terms of getting to know your body, getting to know its physical resources, the limits of your energy, right? What kind of tangible resources, Capricorn, do I need to pursue what I'm pursuing as a fire sign, right? Okay. And that's also feeling kind of 9th housey, like the road towards what I seek is never ending, and therefore, like, I'm illuminating just how far I have to go, but also seeing just how far I've come as well. The Three of Cups is beautiful. It's the lovely reminder to connect with people this season. So we're thinking about others. There's a big 3rd house activation happening here, right? So our peers, our immediate environment, our neighborhood, our siblings, hanging out with those people we really care about. Tapping into where we can celebrate with people we love. There's a lot of planets lining up here in this house for you this season, so it might be about maybe you're doing some inventory of what these relationships are to you right now. Maybe you're taking some inventory and clearing out friends who don't celebrate you, or who are fair weather friends, perhaps friends who say they'll be there and don't show up. There's a lot of different, Venus just had a retrograde in your 1st house, ruling that 3rd house. So if there were people who weren't really able to be there for you, or to hold space for you, or allow you to celebrate with them, then maybe that's something you're reconfiguring at this time. The Page of Cups is new insight, new intuition, new possibilities for connection. So if there have been disappointments here in this 3rd house space, if you're clearing out something here, getting rid of, or separating yourself from, we're not getting rid of peers, that's weird, but separating yourself from some spaces that don't feel celebratory for you, that's helping you to open up to new spaces. That's helping you to open up to new instincts and intuition about where you want to celebrate, who you want to connect with, what sort of intuitive ideas are coming to you. This is a beautiful spread here overall, and let's go ahead and roll some dice. But we definitely see where justice plays a part here. You've got to have some energy to lead people toward this vision. If those people you're trying to lead don't celebrate that vision, then it's time to separate from that, knowing that you have to keep yourself going on this road no matter what. We see literal car vehicle correlation here with the Chariot. If this is out of alignment, then I'm not going to have the strength to keep going down this road, or I'm going to be subconsciously pulled to take an off ramp that isn't actually part of the path I'm trying to travel. And again, I'm getting some new insight about kind of what paths are open to me and how I want to travel down them. So by tuning into that idea that this is a big picture drive, I'm helping to reset my GPS in that sense to make sure I stay on it. Leo, it's always about you. Okay, so thinking about the sun being in the 3rd house, ruling your 1st house, you might want to focus on those 3rd house spaces. I knew that Jupiter was saying something. So yeah, thinking about that legacy and maybe rooting into some roles you're able to play or want to play in order to bring this vision to life and also help you keep on this road. And this 4th house space is where Mars is moving into. So I certainly see that kind of catalyzing some of the energy to keep going, right? Mars in that very private space, helping you to get a sense of your energy, helping you to regenerate yourself in order to come back out to this road to continue this drive, and also activating this Page of Cups here in terms of some of those instincts, those intuitions that are available to you now. Mars moving through there and kind of catalyzing that space for you, really activating what those can look like. And that connecting to the Chariot as well. That Page of Cups can be intuitively helping you to navigate this pathway the best way possible. But to get to that Page of Cups, we're sort of having to clear out some of that third house space of what ideas I've had here, who I've been listening to, what my neighborhood looks like. And maybe there is some literal driving away from our kind of neighborhood as it is. Maybe we're going on a trip. Maybe we're taking a trip this month. That would be a very like third house, ninth house, full moon journey, right? I'm taking a long drive. And I'm celebrating with some people. And along the way, I'm opening up some pathways about my intuition and what visions I think are important for myself now. Okay, thank you so much, Leo, for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, I would love if you would like it, give it a share, give it a follow. I'd love to see you back here next month to dive deeper into that Scorpio 4th house and see what Mars has been setting up there for you. Okay, so I'll see you then. Hello, Virgo. Last but certainly not least, welcome to your Libra season forecast. So as we explore Libra season, we are seeing the Sun, the new moon eclipse, Mars, Mercury, and the South Node all moving through your second house of my resources, my values, my skills, and how I use them to make my money. We will see Mars moving into your third house of peers, siblings, immediate environment, neighborhood, the mind. We see Pluto stationing direct in your fifth house of love, affection, children, and play. We're seeing Saturn and Neptune hanging out in your seventh house of one-on-one relationships, business partners, friends, lovers, and enemies. The Aries North Node and this full moon are happening in your eighth house of shared resources and psychological landscape. Jupiter and Uranus are retrograde in your ninth house of beliefs, religion, philosophy, higher learning, faraway travel. And Venus is going to move into your first house of self and how you move through the world after a long retrograde in your 12th house space. So, bully for you, Virgo. Thank goodness. All right, we're going to pull some cards and get a sense of the themes being activated for you this month. And we'll also roll our trusty dice to make it all make sense and see if there's anything we are missing. Okay. Oh, okay. Ooh, wow, the visuals here are very striking. All right, all right, all right, my goodness. So there's a lot that you are kind of sorting through, which makes sense for a Virgo who just had a Mercury retrograde in your first house. That is a lot of information to kind of sort through, a lot of pieces of yourself kind of feeling out of order and maybe needing to be reorganized and put back into place. And we see here in the Death card, you know, these kind of give me like almost a similar vibe. So we're going to kind of look at them together. Death card here is certainly saying that something is ending, and we don't mean that in a literal way necessarily, although death is a very natural part of life. But there is a way of being coming to a close, and maybe this is sort of being illuminated by this activity in your eighth house, right? This psychological landscape. And so there's something within this Death card that is signaling a change. Again, these retrogrades, Venus having this long retrograde in your 12th house, really activating any feelings of isolation, any feelings of like karma resolution, or feeling like you're losing faith in something can be a retrograde in your 12th house vibe. And so there's, again, coupling that with everything that you've learned about yourself as well with this Virgo Mercury retrograde that happened in your first house, especially if it like moved across your ascendant, right? If we're thinking about like whatever degree your ascendant is, Mercury could have certainly been just bouncing all around that. And so there are parts of you that have now changed. Whatever Venus was doing in that retrograde, in that 12th house space, is ending something, is bringing something to an end in that 12th house. Something that you've believed, something that was lost from you now being found, or something you thought was yours now being lost. That 12th house is a house of endings. And so whatever happened in that retrograde, Venus moving into your first house is now going to make real and conscious to you. So it may have been happening in the background, in that subconscious space. You may have felt it, but not really known what it meant or looked like. You will now start to get a sense of what has ended or been transmuted or changed in the process of that Venus retrograde in your 12th house. So these elements, these events combined certainly show us that something is, you're moving through a process of release. Some part of you is forever changing at this time. And it's best to just lean into it, right? And to just go through that process willingly, knowing that you come out on the other side transformed, right? Rebalanced in temperance. I am now back to my sense of balance within myself. Okay, and then we move into the Seven of Cups. We think about how something about the present is, or here we go, our perception of what we presently have access to, or what is currently in front of us, is being shaped by events and memories and imprints from the past. So there's a need to get clear on, what am I truly experiencing? What am I really looking at? And that's certainly bringing me back to the 8th house full moon and all that activity in your 2nd house. What do I tangibly see in front of me? And then what is it tethered to in my deeper subconscious space that is shaping what I think I'm holding in my hands right now? So in this 7 of Cups, we are sort of grappling with what it is that we're actually looking at. I think I see what I want to see, but I am also kind of contorting what I'm looking at based on what I have felt in the past. So is this real right now? Is this actually in front of me? Is this being colored by something I've experienced in the past? And let me get clear on those emotions and how they shaped me in order to understand what my choices tangibly are in front of me. We'll keep mistaking what's in front of us, for better or for worse, coloring it more positively, coloring it more negatively, so long as we are allowing those past emotions to dictate what we're seeing in this moment. So that could certainly be a part of this death process, letting some of those false notions die, letting some of those old influences become conscious so that we can move through them. And weaving in this 8 of Swords, there's absolutely anxiety that happens in this process. By the time we reach the 8, we don't know how to escape the anxiety that starts to close in on us. You can think about the fact that this figure has their eyes closed, and that's because of the pressure of all of the storm that's around them. But it's also what's preventing them from being able to clear the field. So we're having an emotional component of seeing what we see in front of us, and a mental component of not wanting to really see, because we're terrified of what we're going to see ourselves amongst once we open our eyes. So I think these both connect to the Death card. You need to be willing to open your eyes in order to find your way out of this storm. These boxes are going to keep closing in the longer these eyes are closed. And so it's only through choosing to see and choosing to accept what is around us at this time in order to confront the emotions that are coloring what we are in and what we're a part of, to then let this death process happen. Now, the beam of light here in this spread is this Ace of Wands. And the Ace can be an emergence of something new, which feels right for this Death card, as I confront my anxiety about where I've led myself, right? Because it looks like someone did this to us, but we actually kind of wandered into this position, and now we are perceiving ourselves as helpless. Is that because of events from the past where I really was helpless? And is that coloring what I think is possible for me at this time? Can I surrender to letting these things die away in order to allow space for something new to emerge? This is also something that I've wanted for some time that could now be possible. But it does still feel like the only way to access the kind of strike while the iron is hot vibe of this Ace of Wands is to choose it. And the only way to choose it is to not choose these, right? So how we can do that is to, again, open our eyes and reframe what our options are, because this may have been an option. Whether this was or was not an option is not relevant, but it is important right now to get clear on what's informing us in this moment from thinking this is an option now. Where in my mind have I led myself into a corner that I now feel terrified to actually acknowledge? Why? What has happened in the past that was real or was not real or felt real that is making me not want to acknowledge what's happening in the present? And where are these two events bookending and sort of keeping me from accessing what actually is possible now? The Ace of Wands can be the saving grace, the pathway out of this space, but you do have to be willing to open your eyes to see that it's available to you now. And I think the Death card is here to initiate this process for you. We can definitely see where justice comes into play here. Something about our values or what we currently hold close to ourselves may be causing us more pain than it is giving us joy and peace, the way that a healthy Libra space does. And we need to kind of release something in that second house space in order to access what is available to us more deeply in that 8th house space. And that's also where that full moon is illuminating this 8 here of psychological landscape. And what anxieties are you avoiding in that space that need to be cleared out and confronted? They can only be cleared out by seeing them first. Okay. And the Chariot, absolutely, whatever we're driving toward, we may have some dissonance in our conscious drive towards something we think we need and our subconscious drive towards something we desire. And of course, that's happening if we don't even know what we're looking at and how our current emotional state is informed by the past and is informing what we think is in front of us now. 5, Mars, Sagittarius. Okay, so I'm thinking about that 4th house space is Sagittarius, right? Maybe there's something about that origin story that needs to be looked at. Maybe something about early childhood is informing these 7 of Cups and these 8 of Swords. What did you think was possible, Sagittarius, in your youth, 4th house, in your early childhood, 4th house, in the home you grew up in, or from your lineage story that became quashed for you in some way that was so disappointing that it has now influenced what you think you're looking at being possible for you now? Mars moving through your 3rd house of peers, immediate environment, and the mind. Maybe it's time to separate ourselves from some of our mental activity in the 3rd house, right? Everything that's in that 3rd house was also squared by Venus in that 12th house during that retrograde. And that certainly aggravated some of where your thoughts originate from, where your thoughts begin in the mind. And so there's something there that needs to be reconciled. The 5th house is where Pluto has just, or is about to rather, station direct. And that can absolutely be illuminating in terms of understanding where your power is in your self-expression, in your offering of love, in your offering of affection, in your experience with play, your desire to play, and the power that play has for you. Play can be an absolutely beautiful way to shift out of some of these darker places and ignite some imaginative powers. Okay, Virgo, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, I hope that you'll like it, share it, subscribe. I'd love to see you come back next season for Scorpio time, and we'll talk about what Mars is stirring up there in that 3rd house space for you, or perhaps cutting away for you. All right, I'll see you then.